Good evening, everyone. The Durham Public Schools Board of Education work session is now in session. At this time, we wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to inform our parents, staff, and constituents about the work aligned with our mission to embrace, educate, and empower every student to innovate, serve, and lead. The interpreters for tonight are Karen Reyes and Yvette Perez. Thank you for taking the time to join us. This meeting is being interpreted live into Spanish with a delay of a few seconds. We kindly ask that you please pace yourself, pause between ideas, and speak clearly so that everyone can follow along. The first item on our agenda is a moment of silence. All right, thank you. Next, we have agenda review and approval.
Madam Chair, I would ask that we move item 4A, the CIP and bond update, to our May 28th meeting due to illness of staff.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to move the CIP and bond update to May 28th. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And it passes 5-0. We have two board members who will be joining us a bit, just a few minutes late. And now I will take a motion for the agenda.
I move approval of the agenda as amended.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, is there discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes 5-0. The next item is our Board of Education meeting minutes from April 9th, 2026.
Move approval of the agenda, April 29th, minutes, April 29th, 2026.
Second. I'm sorry, April 9th.
April 9th, 2026.
Second.
All right, there's been a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 9th, 2026 by Ms. Harold Goff, seconded by Vice Chair Rogers. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 And it was approved 6-0. The next item on our agenda is public comment. And we will, we will read the rules for public comment, and then we will begin with each person having 1 minute to speak. A quick review of the rules, please. First, please state your name. If speaking for an organization, please state your name and the name of the organization. Second, speakers are asked to present their comments in the time of 1 minute. When the yellow light comes on, you have 30 seconds left to start winding up your remarks. When the red light comes on, it will beep, which indicates your time is up. Complaints about named staff, students, or parents should not be voiced in open session. However, we are very interested in hearing your concerns with regard to public education, the safety of students, or to the operation of the school system. Finally, board members will listen carefully and consider the comments, but we do not engage in a discussion with speakers. So with that, and I'll read the first few. The first speaker is Jennifer Canole. Please do forgive mispronunciations of names. Second, Sophia Canole, and third, Adam Valentine, or something like that.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Kendall. I'm a parent from Barton Elementary, and I'm going to cede my time to my daughter, Sophia.
Hello, my name is Sophia Candle from Burton Elementary School, 5th grade. My reading teacher, Miss Dwyer, is from Jamaica, and she was recently informed that she may lose her employment visa. Miss Dwyer has pushed me to succeed this year, and she makes sure she gives each student the attention they need. I personally believe that having international teachers enhances the curriculum for every student. I have had many international teachers, all of whom have helped me and my classmates grow. Their different viewpoints help us as a community. One of my favorite teachers ever, Miss Palacios, is also an international teacher, and she taught me so much. Also, we have many multicultural students in our school, and our international teachers can connect with these students through shared language and culture. The standard of teaching is not lessened. In fact, I feel it is increased by having these teachers in our school. I hope you will reconsider your decision regarding the discontinuation of the employment visas for our teacher. No one of my family will go down without being fought for. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And next we have Adam Valentine or something like that, and then Ella Ruth Van Hine, and then Carrie Dwyer.
Yes, my name is Adam Van Hine with Burton Elementary, and I'm going to yield my time to my wife Taylor. And
Me too.
say I'm Ella Ruth Van Hine from Burton.
Good evening. My name is Taylor Van Hine, and I'm a parent of a first grader at Burton Elementary. I wanted to come here tonight to ask you to please reconsider discontinuing the H-1B visa sponsorship program. Burton Elementary is an international baccalaureate or IB school. From the IB website, I will quote, "The International Baccalaureate is a global leader in international education. Their goal is to foster global thinkers. Burton achieves this not just through textbooks, but through our international educators." Burton currently has 31 teachers, and 2 of those teachers are being forced out this year due to this decision. There will be 2 more next year. In total, that is 13% of teachers lost at Burton. This will include the music teacher. I have spent the last 2 years working very closely with the music teacher. I myself was a music teacher for 9 years, teaching in North Carolina and California. And so I was excited to work with my own child's music teacher and help her in whatever way she needed. She welcomed me into her classroom, and we have been a great team and friends ever since. I've been backstage and in the classroom for music clubs, winter programs, musicals, and talent shows. In fact, as soon as we leave this meeting, our teachers and administrators who are here tonight will be heading straight back to Burton for tonight's spring talent show, which is why that teacher could not be here tonight. She is at school after hours prepping for the show. Through working with this teacher, I've seen the profound impact she has made on our students with music, but also her Jamaican heritage. I have watched our children light up while learning traditional Jamaican songs, dances, and games. The best teachers I have worked with bring their entire self into the classroom. This teacher brings her entire self and the entire island of Jamaica into every lesson, song, and rehearsal. When she shares the traditions of her home, she isn't just teaching notes on a scale, she is showing authentic representation of the IB idea of global learning that Burton values and DPS claims to value. These teachers have been chosen to spend their lives and careers educating our children and enriching our communities. They jump through every hoop to be here on their visas and were previously promised the security that their lives won't be upended by the decision back in October. To then turn around and reverse that decision with no justification given is completely unfair and detrimental to not only our schools and students, but to DPS and our community. We will lose 240 teachers in DPS. I have to ask, was this a political decision, a financial decision, and did you have the best interest of our students and community in mind? Taking these teachers away is a disservice to our
Thank you. And you can always email us the remainder of your comments at boe@dpsnc.net. Thank you so much. I think maybe we did not yet get to Carvel Dwyer, and then we have Tony Ann Young, and then Xiomara Lopez.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carvel Dwyer. I'm from Burton Elementary. I'm ceding my time to Tony and Young.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tony and Young, and I'm ceding my time to Ms. Lopez.
Hello, I'm Ms. Lopez, and I'm ceding my time to Mr. Oshland.
It can only be, okay, yeah, so, there can be, seating of time 2 times, for a total of, 3 minutes, so. Would anyone else like to use then a minute of their time? Or no? Okay.
Greetings, board. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Thank you, board, for listening to me today. My name is Brandon Daniel. I'm a 5th grade teacher at Burton Elementary School. I came to the board a couple of months ago to speak on behalf of our school and our international teachers. I only had a minute, so I didn't get to fully express what was in my heart, and that's why I'm here today. Burton Elementary is a special place. We have been designated as a National School of Merit. We are a Blue Ribbon Lighthouse School of Excellence. We truly are a lighthouse that shines for our students and our community. We guide and keep safe those that are in our care and help meet their needs every day. We do this as a team. We do not have the financial resources that other schools may have, but we make up for it with our people, our human resources. And I'm writing this email because, or doing this speech because, sorry, we're about to lose some of those resources. My colleague, Ms. Carvel Dwyer, has been an international teacher with us for the past 10 years. She has ingrained herself in our community and helped our students reach historical heights. Her own children have attended and still attend Durham Public Schools. One will hopefully graduate in our International Baccalaureate program in a couple of years. Our 5th graders under her care exceed performance expectations with 80% or above proficiency in English language arts for 5th grade, based on grade exams for North Carolina EOG. A few years ago, 90% of our students passed those same English language arts end of exam tests. This year, on our end of Y test, as we get ready for our EOGs, the same thing happened again. So we have an excellent teacher based on many factors. Student data and student testimonials can confirm it. I invite you to come and watch one day and see the amazing things that she does. She is a lighthouse, and she helps build lighthouses in our school. Our students glow, and they guide their peers, their friends, and their siblings. She has helped us build something special at Burton. When we do not build our lighthouse with bricks, we build it with our people. So I heard the word equity used when discussing the retention of our international teachers. Sometimes I lose hope on equity. I know some schools and some districts have more. That has not deterred us at Burton. Equity to us means fighting harder, limited resources, and doing more with less just to be part of the same conversation. We accept that challenge every day because we don't fight to be recognized. We do it because our students deserve it. Our students deserve a teacher like Ms. Dwyer because she shines the light on them, and they in turn shine for all of us. So I know budgets can influence decisions, but we have our own funding for our teachers. We can self-fund this. We just need creative solutions with you. We're not asking for money, just helpful solutions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I think we skipped Robert Oshland.
My name is Robert Ocean. I planned on ceding my time to Brandon Daniel. I'll just cede my time to the next speaker
Okay, thank you.
from Burton.
Amanda Bass, and then Denise Bullock.
Hi, I'm Amanda Bass from Burton. I'll be ceding my time to Denise Bullock.
And Denise will have 3 minutes.
My name is Rashid Gang. I'm here from Burton.
I'm sorry, hold on 1 second. Is
My,
Denise is, okay, okay, correct. And then, what was your name?
Gang.
think I have someone, is there someone, Paula Emezi? What? Emezi? I'm sorry, hold on one second, okay? Well, I'm not sure. I think you might be a little bit further down the list. In the red, yeah, okay. Or you may sit down, of course, but yeah, we will come back to you. Where are we now? Okay, hold on one second. Maybe someone else was. We are at, you would have 3 minutes. Would you like to speak? Okay. To Emily Schofield? Okay. Okay. And you can have 3 minutes. Okay. 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 I thought Denise Bullock. Can she concede her time to in the red, and then she concede her time to you? Okay, so. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, okay.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Schofield. I'm the new school counselor at Burton Elementary. I appreciate everyone kind of allowing their time for me to speak today. So as we know, Burton Magnet Elementary, we're an IB school. We're an international baccalaureate school. According to the Durham Public School website, the goal of the IB curriculum is to develop students into adults who are confident, critical, and independent thinkers with a global perspective. I really want to highlight that phrase, global perspective. Discontinuing the visa sponsorship for our international teachers will directly impact our ability to provide our students with that global perspective, which is promised to our students and families through our magnet program. At Burton Magnet School alone, we currently have 2 teachers impacted by the discontinuation of the visa sponsorship this year, both of whom have demonstrated such strong student achievement data every year. We have 2 additional teachers who will be in the same situation next year. Many charter schools are willing to pay for this visa sponsorship. That means that DPS will be losing highly qualified teachers to neighboring charter schools. There are currently 264 DPS teachers serving on this international visas. I beg all members of the board and everyone in a position of power to consider the ramifications that our schools and students will face by discontinuing the service of these 264 teachers who are here on this international visa. Our students, staff, and communities will never be the same if we lose these impactful educators who are able to, again, share their global perspective. Again, part of our magnet program is that global perspective. So I beg you all to kind of consider that. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Nashua Orabi, and then Rashid Elgang, and Nick Burns.
Joshua Arabi. I'm a parent and a teacher at Burton Elementary, and I cede my time to Rashid.
My name is Rashid Gang from Burton. I am the student council president at Burton Elementary. I'm here tonight to ask you to keep supporting and sponsoring international teachers in our school. Students from all around the district are able to learn from people from all around the world. International teachers bring culture, language, traditions, and different teaching styles in our classroom that help students see beyond where we live and learn about the world around us. But international teachers also bring something else that is very important, their expertise and knowledge. During my time at Burton, I've been in 2 classrooms with international teachers. Because of them, I learned about countries like Ecuador and Jamaica. I learned new vocabulary and phrases, different cultures, and new ways of learning These expertise helped me grow not only academically, but also personally. My reading, spelling, handwriting, vocabulary, and confidence improved. Their teaching did not take away from DPS curriculum, they made it better. Before international program, Burden was a D school. Now we are a B school. International teachers apply their skills, expertise into the curriculum already being taught in our school, and they also helped raise academic expectations to a more global level. They encourage students to think bigger, work harder, and learn about the world beyond our community. Burden would not feel the same without diversity, knowledge, and expertise these teachers bring to our school. If you stop the program,
Thank you very much, and please do share your comments via email if you'd like. We have Nick Burns, Emily Kahn, Javanya Lewis.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Nick Burns. I'm the proud father of a 4th grader and a 7th grader who have thrived at Burton Elementary. I'm here tonight to ask for a full reversal of the decision to stop sponsoring H-1B visas for international teachers. International teachers at Burton have had an incredibly positive impact on both of my daughters. Next year, my youngest daughter, Fiona, and her classmates have the opportunity to learn from Ms. Dwyer, an international teacher, a brilliant, highly regarded 5th grade teacher. And now because of this decision, Ms. Dwyer and others are being forced out. I understand that this is a return to a pre-COVID policy, but good leadership adapts. If we don't support our international teachers long-term, we'll lose them to the charter schools who are already offering the visa sponsorships we're denying them. We'll lose some of our best people, and our kids will pay the price for that turnover. Our teachers are committed to our district. Removing their support mid-career impacts the stability of our schools. I respectfully ask that you fully reverse this policy and protect the educators who are protecting our kids' futures. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So next we have Emily Kahn, Javanya Lewis, and then Sarah Arthur.
Good evening. My name is Emily Kahn, and I'm the parent of 2 girls in Durham Public Schools, one at C.C. Spalding Elementary and one at Lakewood Montessori Middle. I'm here tonight because I watched a family in crisis get left behind by this district repeatedly. 2 students at C.C. Spalding who qualified for McKinney-Vento protections. That means that they have a legal right to transportation to their home school during a housing crisis. When their family was displaced to a motel and then a family member's apartment, no bus ever came. The routing process was slow, bureaucratic, and completely unable to keep pace with a rapidly changing situation. And now that family has stable housing with a relative, the bus still doesn't come. Last year, roughly 1,300 DPS students qualified for McKinney-Vento protections. While we don't know yet how many children qualified for this school year, the number has increased every year since COVID. I am asking this board to commission a public accounting of the McKinney-Vento transportation compliance so that this community can see exactly where the system is falling short and hold itself accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Javanya Lewis, Sarah Arthur, and then Nancy Romero.
Good evening, Javanya Lewis from EPIC, Empowered Parents and Community. I really miss these public comments. Thank you for your time. I stand with Burton for sure. Dr. King, 2 years ago, you let us know on the board that we were missing restorative practices in a policy. And this year in 4301.1, it is there. Also, there's the implementation plan to consult principal supervisors before children in kindergarten and elementary school are suspended, and we appreciate that change as well. Out-of-school suspension limits to more serious offenses. Thank you for moving forward with what we asked for doing a policy committee and also giving community input. We appreciate that. I do want to ask you to stretch a little bit more. 3 quick asks. Stretch to include 3rd graders. They should not be disrupted. There's not a big difference between 8 and 9 years old. Remove the words engage in persistent behaviors. Persistent.
Thank you. Please, of course, email your comments. All right, we have Sarah Arthur, Nancy Romero, Lenore Champion.
Right. My name is Sarah Arthur. I'm a parent of this kindergartner at Burton Elementary School. I'm here, but obviously we're all very deeply concerned with the decision to stop sponsoring visa renewals for international teachers. We chose Burton because it's an IB school, and we loved seeing that Burton took that mission seriously, not just through its curriculum, but through the diverse backgrounds, cultures, languages, and experiences represented among its teachers. We're very troubled by this decision. These teachers are not interchangeable staffing placeholders. They're part of what makes our school feel authentic and meaningful and alive. And as a parent of a child who's just beginning his public schools experience, I really also care about stability. Children build trust with these teachers. We build trust with the schools. And at a time when public schools are already losing excellent educators.
Thank you. We have Nancy Romero, Lenora Champion, Michael. Hard to read the last name. Okay, Nancy.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Nancy. Soy una madre de familia. Estoy aquí referente a una alumna de la escuela Hall. Estoy un poco molesta porque han pasado bastantes accidentes con mi hija. El accidente que me tiene un poco más preocupada fue de que dos niñas de la escuela me la encerraron en el baño y me la tocaron. Y mi hija está bastante traumada.
Hi, good evening. My name is Nancy. I'm in here in the name of my daughter that she attends to Holt Elementary School. And I'm here because I have few concerns, the things that happened to my daughter. And one of the things that have me really concerned about it because two students from the school closed my daughter in one of the bathrooms and nobody have done anything.
Me le tocaron sus partes íntimas. Yo la llevé hace poco de emergencia al DUC porque otra niña me la agredió con unas tijeras en su ojo. El doctor me dijo que un poquito más y le tocaba su retina y mi hija hubiera perdido su ojo.
And on the incident that happened in the bathroom, she was touched inappropriately in her private parts by the two girls and nobody done anything to help her out. And now another thing that happened is another student poked her eye when they seized her and I had to take her to the emergency room, to the urgent care, and nobody had done anything either.
El otro accidente fue dentro del bus. Una niña me le reventó su boca y me le sacó un diente. Y mi hija venía con mucha sangre en su camisa. Y todos estos accidentes que han pasado, a mí me han ignorado y no se ha hecho nada.
And one of the other incident that happened, it was in the bus when another student punched her mouth and one of her tooth came out, and she get home with blood in her shirt, and nobody have helped me and do anything to solve any of these incidents.
Quisiera que esas dos niñas, a los padres de familia, los investigaran y quisiera un alejamiento sobre esa niña porque mi hija tiene bastante trauma y necesito un psicólogo que ella platique y que se le olvide lo que pasó, porque mi hija lo recuerda.
And based on this incident, nobody helped my daughter, and what I'm requesting is I want those two kids that did that to my daughter in the bathroom to be exposed, to stay away from my daughter, like to have some type of restriction order from my daughter, because now my daughter needs some type of psychology help and therapy because every time she keep remember all these incidents and it's very traumatizing.
El departamento de policía sabe el incidente que pasó sobre el abuso que hubo con mi hija. Se mandó unos papeles al DUC para hacerle un examen forense a mi hija y no sé qué ha pasado con el DUC, que no, el DUC no me ha contestado eso y a mi hija no se le ha hecho el examen. En emergencia el doctor me dijo que ese examen ya no iba a tener el mismo efecto de cuando sucedió el accidente de que esas dos niñas me la tocaron.
When the first incident happened, we make a report to the Durham Police Department, and they tell me that they need to do a forensic exam to the student, and they send a referral to Duke Hospital. They haven't send me any information, and they haven't seen her. But now that what that what they are saying is like they not going now if they do it, it's not going to be having the same effect.
Thank you. Gracias. Gracias por compartir. And I want to ask a member of the administration to follow up. La administración va a contactar a usted. Gracias. Okay, next we have Lenore Champion, Michael Fuad, something like that, Danielle Irvin.
Greetings, board members, superintendent. I'm Lenore Champion, lead occupational therapist for Durham Public Schools. This is one of my colleagues, Teresa Jones. She's another occupational therapist here. First, I want to thank you for your service. I don't envy you your jobs. I think you have a lot of hard work to do. But I just wanted to give you a small window into how it's been going for our Durham Public Schools occupational therapy team this year. You may remember that I came to the board meeting earlier this school year and mentioned that a third of our OT team resigned over the summer. This made a difficult start for the year and many instances of missed federally mandated student services. And late this past week, I received an email from one of our OT team members. She wanted to reach out and share her experience of this school year as compared to the 24-25 school year. As the numbers are significant, let me just share this one therapist's experience. During the 24-25 school year, she completed
Thank you, and please do send your comments to us. The next is Michael. Yes, probably. I don't have another Michael Israel. And then Danielle Irvin, and then Patricia Russick.
Good evening, good evening, members of the board. My name is Michael Israel. I serve as a PTO president at Burton Elementary, also as a parent, obviously. I'm here tonight not as a policy expert, but as a parent and community member who deeply cares about our students, our teachers, and the future of Durham Public Schools. At Burton, our international teachers are not just filling positions. They are dedicated, deeply cared about educators who have built lasting relationships with our children and families. They stay late, support students beyond the classroom, and create environments where kids feel safe, challenged, and valued. Now, some of those teachers may be forced to leave not because of performance or lack of need, but because DPS may no longer support their visa renewals. That is heartbreaking for students and discouraging for families and educators who invested themselves in the district. Consistency matters, relationships matter, and great teachers matter.
Thank you. We have Danielle Irvin, Patricia Russick, Rob Fields.
Hi, I'm Danielle Irvin. I'm a physical therapist here, and I'm here as on behalf of our department, and especially Christy, who can't be here today as she usually is. She and we have been fighting for the last couple years since the raises that were taken away to just get our PT, OT, and CODAs, the raises that we know we should have that are appropriate for our positions. We are masters and doctorates, and so many are leaving. Even PTs have positions vacant now that we cannot fill because of the salary. And Durham's strategic plan talks about providing an excellent school for every student, and we are part of making that happen by helping our kids safely access their school every day. And if we cannot recruit and retain professionals needed, we cannot do that. So we're here. I know budgets are difficult, but we're here asking to find the money somewhere to help recruit and retain some people. And please don't change the meet and confer policy because it's super important for all staff. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Patricia Russick, Rob Fields, Greg Whitaker.
Hi, I'm Patricia Russick, and I teach at Little River. The experts were called, the findings concrete. SM&E made recommendations clear. Pull the carpets, strip paper from the walls. Yet 9 months later, solutions still stall. The test confirmed questionable air quality, mold present. When will solutions become permanent and fix and replace temporary fixes. Children cannot pause their lungs while systems are left unfixed. Teachers cannot hold their breath and teach concurrently. Every day this remains unresolved, the method becomes clearer. The documented concerns are not guaranteed actions. Resolution is possible. Leadership can choose to stop the delay. God equips you fully to handle the difficulties that are your responsibilities. Tonight, I ask not for another air quality test, not for another.
Thank you. Rob Fields, Greg Whitaker, Dr. Jennifer Girish.
Good evening. My name is Rob Fields. I'm a DPS grandparent. I came here originally to talk about the capital improvement plan, but since you're not going to talk about that tonight, I started to leave. Then I heard everybody talking about Burton. You'll take all of your elementary schools, and if you'll rank them from the schools who have the demographics that have historically been most challenging, from the schools who have economically disadvantaged student populations, to the schools who don't have faced those challenges. And then if you'll rank the performance in reading in elementary school of those students, you'll see something that Burton stands out. Burton will be at the top of both of those lists, which is unusual. Usually those lists are reversed. If these parents are asking for something for Burton, y'all ought to be listening. You ought to be listening hard, because whatever they're doing at Burton, you ought to figure it out and bottle it.
Thank you. Greg Whitaker, Dr. Jennifer Girish, and Alexandra Valladares.
Hi, my name is Greg Whitaker. I cede my time to Dr. Jennifer Girish.
Do not start that timer yet. Do not, I have, please restart that timer. Not even up here when they started it. Hello? Started? Okay. Hello, my name is Jennifer Garish, and I'm here in my role as a representative of Durham Advocates for Exceptional Children. I am the co-chair of the Durham Advocates for Exceptional Children Committee on Suspensions. I'm also the mom of 3 DPS students with disabilities. While I'm no stranger to you and to making public comment, I do not stand up here alone. Durham Advocates for Exceptional Children represents a large, growing, diverse group of family caregivers and advocates seeking to lift up the needs of our children with disabilities. There are 2 policies that will be read tonight for the first time on seclusion and restraint in the Code of Conduct. First, we want to thank the board and Dr. Lewis and his team for their leadership in improving these policies. They are improved. We have sent to your board email documents that detail our copious amount of feedback and guidance on these policies. As parents of children with disabilities, these policies are deeply personal to me. Like many of our members in Durham Advocates for Exceptional Children, these traumatizing disciplinary actions are used against my children and our children of other members. Our children with disabilities are more likely to be suspended. They're more likely to be held in seclusion. They're more likely to be restrained. These rates are amplified if our children happen to also be Black and of Hispanic origin. My ask tonight is simple. Please continue to target protections for students with disabilities. Please keep centering on them. To take the opportunity to make these policies clearer for everyone, to bring them closer to federal guidance and best practices, to rely on evidence-based practices, such as why limiting principal supervisor oversight to suspensions in those in 2nd grade. There's no evidence. It should be, at least for all elementary age kids. Explicitly prohibit tying, taping, and strapping students down, please, and use our own data to monitor how these policies are changing to impact.
Thank you. We have Alexandra Valladares, Gabriela Maradiaga, Jim Spara.
Good evening, board. Good evening, administrators. Thank you all for everything you do. These are hard times. These are times with I mean, the levels of intensity and stress and the levels of overload, possibly unwarranted. And so just want to take a moment to breathe with you and just say that I've been in your seat and that I know that we're all working towards serving, embracing, educating, empowering every student to innovate, serve, and lead. And one of the things that is hurting my heart is the level at which it seems like, instead of us moving down the path of amongst ourselves, least restriction, definitely not against the forces. We are fighting forces that are diminishing public education and funding. We have to fight those. But the level at which we're not supporting each other is affecting things. And so anyways.
Thank you. Gabriela Maradiaga, Jim Spara. I don't think Gabriela is here. Jim? Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Gabriela Maradiaga Panayoti. I'm a pediatrician here in Durham. I've been practicing for 20 years, and I am here to share my experience as a professional taking care of children and as a mom of 2 middle schoolers in DPS. In my time in practice, I saw mental health issues every day in children. They ran the gamut from my stomach hurts all the time to I can't go to school. Mental health issues abound, and they show up in all sorts of ways in children, to the extreme of cutting and actual suicidal behavior. In medicine, there is a concept called toxic stress, which refers to chronic changes in the neurological structure of the brain and the nervous system. And when children experience toxic stress, which is the cumulative effect of stressors of many kinds as children.
Please, please email us your comments. Thank you. Our final speaker is Jim Spara.
Good evening. I'm Jim Savara, co-chair of the Policy Committee of the Coalition for Affordable Housing and Transit. As you know, we are very committed to promoting affordable housing close to the rail trail that's going to be developed. Having examined all the possible publicly owned sites, only one stands out as an outstanding location that could have a large project. The northern 3 acres of the Durham School of the Arts when students are gone from there. It is just 1 block away from the rail trail. We're asking the Board of Education, indicate your willingness to sell the property to the county for this purpose. Once that's done, then we can shift our attention to working on the county commissioners to get them to agree to do this. Some of you feel that maybe you should wait until the new board is in place, but that will take time for them to get settled in and ready to make a decision of this kind. And the county will have to come back to that group to get their offer accepted. So I hope you can go ahead and do that very soon.
Thank you. All right. So that concludes public comment. Thank you to everyone for coming out this evening. And the next agenda item is our consent items.
Move approval of the consent agenda. Item 2A, First Hope Fire Extinguisher Contract 2627. Item 2B, First Hope Fire Extinguisher Kitchen Hood Cleaning Contract Renewal 2026-2027. Item 2C, First Hope Fire Extinguisher Kitchen Hood Inspections Contract Renewal 2026-2027. Item 2D, First Hope Fire Extinguisher Emergency Exit Light Inspections Contract Renewal 2026-2027. Item 2E, First Hope Fire Extinguisher Life Safety Repairs. Item 2F, Miller Elevators Monthly Elevator Inspections Contract. Item 2G, Miller Elevators District-Wide Elevator Repairs Contract. Item 2H, Home Paramount Pest Control Services Monthly Preventive
services contract. Item 2I, home paramount on-call and additional services contract. Item 2J, CTE College and Career Ready Labs purchase. Item 2K, CTE Z-Space Learning Systems purchase. Item 2L, exceptional children's contract for occupational therapist, speech language pathologist, and physical therapist. Item 2M, policy 6340, transportation services vehicle contracts, first reading. Item 2N, policy 4270 and 6145, concussion and head injury, first reading.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Hopefully there are no modifications. We don't want to go through that list again. All right, any other discussion? I'm just kidding. That's fine if there are modifications. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes 6-0. All right, and now we will move on to a Board of Education item, waive policy 2231 in order to discuss policy 7215. And I will pass it to Ms. Byer.
Thank you so much. The Pracies reads, the 2025-26 academic year marked a historic milestone as Durham Public Schools became the first school district in North Carolina to adopt a meet and confer policy. In June of 2025, prior to the 2025-26 academic year, the board also adopted Policy 2231, establishing a board policy committee, a policy committee of the board. Together, these policies accelerated the challenging and collaborative work of the district. These minor policy edits to Policy 7215 Meet and Confer Committee on Employee Relations are recommended for consideration and discussion by the board. And then it delineates specific recommendations that are here for discussion this evening. Discussion, not action. Discussion, not action. The first is the notion of adding a cross-reference to the policy, to Policy 2231 that references the policy committee. The second is some change, and this is my suggestion, but I welcome others obviously on any of these, any discussion. But the chart in C2 actually is not completed, and the language is not consistent throughout. So I think it needs to be made consistent. My suggestion was by specifying % quote of district employees in every row of that table, just to fill it out. The third is the suggestion to modify the language in D1 about the meeting frequency and procedures. To the committee will meet up to 6 times annually and no more often than once per month. And then saying that feedback from the meet and confer, this is an addition, feedback from the meet and confer committee on the superintendent's proposed budget is encouraged, but must not delay the adoption of the board's budget. The fourth would be to modify the language in section D1 where it refers twice to the M&C committee, to just spell that out and call it the meet and confer committee. The fifth would be the consideration of adding a bullet, the E6 to section E6. Meetings will be facilitated by a trained independent facilitator, the chair and vice chair, and y'all remember that that is the superintendent and the president of the Durham Association of Educators, will select the facilitator, and any cost incurred for facilitation will be shared equally between the district and the ERO. Finally, the suggestion is the modification of section F2. The meet and confer committee may make policy recommendations to the board's policy committee when the meet and confer committee reaches general agreement as signified by signature of the chair and vice chair. That would be the superintendent and the president of the Durham Association of Educators. And then as that kind of makes things unnecessary. I would suggest deleting the words "formal policy recommendations suggested by the committee may be presented to the board if approved by the superintendent." As background to this, there are existing conflicts in the meet and confer committee language between the policy committee policy and the meet and confer policy. And Ms. Carta Otten, Board Member Carta Otten, has done a remarkable job moving a tremendous amount of policy work through the policy committee this year. We had a all-day policy committee retreat on April 30th. This item and that tension, that lack of clarity between those two policies was on the agenda for discussion. And that did not, we ran out of time before we got to this issue. And I would just remind us all that certification in the meet and confer policy is must be done and completed by May 31st every year, which is a deadline that is fast approaching. I hope that in our next board meeting or in the upcoming policy meeting or in our new board retreat or here tonight, we could as a group have conversations about how we would rectify some of that language that is not clear, and whether these ideas that I have brought are of interest to other members of the board, other members of the community, other members of the meet and confer team. These items have been publicly posted and shared on the agenda. I've had conversations with all of you, which have been the beginning of conversations. And I brought them with transparency. I bring them in full collaboration. I make no decisions on my own and never would. I have also emailed the president of the Durham Association of Educators on Tuesday when the materials were posted. Welcome her feedback, welcome their feedback, welcome all feedback, as all of us do, on anything that this board should and could do. Let me think if there was any other background to any of that. I do think these are fairly minor edits. And whether this board takes them up, future boards take them up, I believe that it is a great responsibility to celebrate the work of Meet and Confer and also look at making sure that we are clear in our expectations about how to be supportive of that. I also attended every Meet and Confer meeting except for one when I was sick, and I watched it live stream from my house. And so I know of many things to be celebrated there. And I think some improvements that I think the board can set in ways going forward. I had not noticed until I had a conversation with Ms. Carta Otten that the way we wrote policy committee language is that all policy comes to policy committee. And those two policies being in tension is both good and bad, but I think we need to figure out if there are any changes to be made to this that would help it before the certification, May 31st. So that's how I'm thinking about this, in a way of wanting to hear from all of you, all 7 of us, in some kind of robust conversation. Yeah. My final point would be I've had one conversation with one of the incoming board members. I haven't reached all the rest of them yet, but I welcome those conversations and I'm sure all of us do going forward. Thank you.
All right. I saw Ms. Carter Otten.
So in February of 2025, over a year ago, this board met to discuss the possibility of forming a policy committee. And this discussion was in direct response to the work that 3 board members were doing to create a new policy and to stated concerns around open meetings laws with board members, concerns about board members, quote unquote, shopping a policy outside of public meetings, in addition to concerns about work moving forward on a policy before the majority of the board had agreed the policy was a priority. So as a result, an ad hoc committee, we all lived through this, just refreshing our memories here. So an ad hoc committee was formed to develop the policy committee policy. This group met multiple times to meticulously craft a policy, which was then adopted in June of last year, June of 2025. So one item that was debated in conversations about the policy committee policy was about how ideas for new and revised policies come before the board. And in the end, after much debate, we decided on the following 2 things. 1, all requests for a new policy and amendments to the existing policy shall be directed to the policy committee. And 2, the policy committee chair, in consultation with the superintendent, might recommend that the board review a policy prior to policy committee review when circumstances are exigent and emergent and require expedited processing. I'd want to note that neither of these 2 things has happened in the past week when this item was put on the agenda. That is in violation of the policy committee policy. Another key component of the policy committee policy was the timeline for submission of policy ideas and the prioritization process. I just went back and watched this meeting. We had lots of debates around the dates and then about how prioritization would happen. And in the end, we decided that board members and administration and community members would all submit requests for policy recommendations by August 31st of each year, and that then the committee would meet to decide on a prioritization of the policies and bring it back to the board in September. So we did that. We met on September 18th in the policy committee. We reviewed all the submissions. We followed the prioritization and the criteria in the policy committee policy. And then we brought that back to the September 25th board meeting where the full board reviewed that and took a vote on the order in which the policies would be addressed in the policy committee. We did the same thing per policy committee policy in February of this year, which is also again written to the policy. Each new year, we will re-tier. We'll take new submissions. We'll consider NCSBA recommendations. Then we'll re-tier. That was done. We had a robust conversation in public, and the board once again voted on a prioritization. At neither of these different time points was policy 7215 mentioned. It was not submitted to this process. It was not put in the tiering, despite board members bringing other policies forward and putting those into the tiering process. What the board did agree to was the list that we still have. So we have 12 tier 2 policies remain on our list and 18 tier 3 policies. So 30 policies that are above, that are in the queue in front of 7215. So these policies govern how we and under what circumstances we can physically restrain or we can seclude students. These policies include when we can suspend our youngest students. Spoiler alert, we suspended 30 kindergartners this year already. Most of them have IEPs and most are Black or Hispanic. These policies are about expectations for early literacy support around the use of AI. So no, I don't think that this policy that one board member wants to bring before this board should be bumped ahead of the 30 other policies that are in the line that this board has already decided not once but twice that we want to prioritize.
Others?
I appreciate that history and I appreciate that work. There's the only correction that I would offer is that it became apparent as two policies came out of the meet and confer process. They are a budget transparency policy and an employee grievance policy that we learned that meet and confer does not have board attorney representation at it. And so that those policies come and there isn't clarity on what to do with them. And so you and I had conversations, whether there's written documentation or not, that I noticed that concern and lack of clarity and tension between those two policies and the need to correct it, which is why it was on the agenda for the retreat. And I very much hoped that we would get to it at the retreat so that we could bring clarity to that issue alone, if nothing else. And I think that was all of our hope. What I do believe profoundly is that that it is the board's policy and it is the board's responsibility if we have two policies that have conflict between them to resolve them. It is not on the administration to make that catch for us and tell us, this is not clear. And so while I think that Meet and Confer has been one of the greatest historic celebratory, wins for this district, I think I was at the march, the Kids Over Corporations with Mr. Tab. I'm so excited to see and stand in solidarity as being the only school district that passed a Kids Over Corporations resolution. And this whole board stands in solidarity with workers. I put here as a suggestion that I think it is the board's responsibility before we start another cycle, which brought great success and great challenge, to clarify at least that point so for future work and future boards. But I really appreciate anyone's consideration. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Rogers, Vice Chair Rogers.
Thank you both for sharing. What I do want to raise that our policy 2330 talks about two board members being able to bring an agenda item to the meeting. And that remains the case. And in this certain situation, two board members have requested this item be put on the agenda for discussion. I would like us to hold that discussion, not dismissing what has been said. That policy has not been changed to create the only way for policy to come to the agenda is through the policy committee. And I look forward to other leaders and board members working and doing the work of putting together recommendations, other agenda items, resolutions, and things to come to the board and use that policy to get it to the board table. I look forward to when the policy committee chair or the superintendent has a recommendation that that has become urgent or extingent to supersede the policy committee policy and bring items to the agenda. I look forward to things coming to the agenda through the same channels that we normally bring things through. I think we have to do all of the above. And I would not stop any of those policies from coming to the agenda at any point so that we can have discussion. I did appreciate the policy retreat. I'd hoped we would get to this policy so we could talk through some of that more around the disconnects in the two policies and how to create that. I would like the board to have a conversation so that we can decide, as per our policy around board work sessions in 2235, what to do with the recommendations that Ms. Byer has brought to us and where to direct it, whether to determine what changes should be made, if any, at this time, what other community engagement needs to be done around this policy, and whether to bring it back for second read for action. But we can't do that without having the discussion. So I hope that we can put aside our differences about how this agenda item got here, why this agenda item is here, and have a real discussion about the merits of the policy changes that have been requested. And I also think that I know it's important to me that community members have called on us to help shift the culture of this committee. And for us to be able to respond to that and having a discussion about that allows us to have that discussion at the board table in open session. And we all know where we stand on it. That's my ask.
All right. And I see Ms. Harold Goff. I just want to note the agenda item is here, waive policy 2231 in order to consider policy 7215 for discussion. We haven't had a motion yet. Ms. Harold Goff?
Before I make that motion, in response to what I've heard so far, the word exigent, I can never say that word correctly, circumstances of why things would come out of policy committee and come to the board has been used a lot. I personally do not feel that anything that is on this policy is exigent to where it would need to come here before, especially since it's up next in policy committee, which is very, very soon. I'm very interested in, this is the first year of this policy and the first year of this process. I'm interested in being able to give the leadership of the policy committee an opportunity to have time to assess and to also bring what they feel would be appropriate. You know, I know that there's work going on with leadership within the meet and confer committee. And so giving the leadership, the chair and the vice chair, the two co-chairs, an opportunity to also offer their feedback on what policy changes should be made. I'd like to look at that holistically. And without beating the bush, this was the discussion about whether or not two board members would be able to bring something from policy. That was the whole thing that had us stuck before. So I welcome the conversation with all board members, but I'm also wanting to support us sticking to the same procedures so that we know what our guardrails are with how we govern collectively. So I would like to make a motion. I'm not sure how this motion works. We're supposed to be making a motion to waive the policy in order to discuss. So I don't want to make that motion. Somebody else has to make that motion. But we can't discuss it unless we do that first, is my understanding.
Mr. Tam?
Thank you very much. How do we get here? We got here because we have a policy that says two board members can have to agree to get something to be on the agenda. I was the other person, I want to be very clear, to get something on the agenda because I stand by that any board member on this dais should be able to bring something to the table for discussion. That's the primary purpose of this for a work session, is for us to discuss something. That doesn't mean that people are going to vote a certain way or not vote a certain way, but just for discussion. Because this issue has come up, I would love to hear from my colleagues to discuss this, because this is the platform that we should be discussing it. Not necessarily meaning which way we're going to lean or not, but just for discussion. And so when I'm looking at the braces here is, it also says action. I wasn't sure how did action get checked on this when we were just going to do discussion.
My understanding is the action is to waive the policy so that we can
Okay.
have the discussion. It's not action on the policy.
Okay, just, so I'd like stuff to be clear that that's why it's there, because I'm sure there are people out there who want to know how we get to that point. So that's where I am, and just want to have the discussion.
Ms. Harold Goff?
I'm sure that there's a lot of discussion that's going to be coming out of policy committee on various policies. And if we're not going to honor that process, it could create a lot of confusion, a lot of, if we just, if about when and how we're doing things, and it's also very hard to communicate to, our onboarding board members what to expect and how procedures work if we're always going to be flip-flopping. The only reason why I'm being a stickler about this particular one is because I was one of the voices early on that was like, we want to be able to bring any, and the policy in particular, our policy committee policy does not have in it that any two board members bring it. And so we're saying now, so when we were trying to do that before, it wasn't honored. So now we want to honor, and I do want to have the discussion. So, and, and whatever we decide about whether or not to waive it, I would love to do that. But it's important to make this point because we have to honor our consistency on how we govern collectively. And so this is a very important discussion. Having said all of that, I also, I see these points. I know that policy committee is coming back. I mean, to discuss this in the very next meeting. It's in writing. We've seen it for discussion. And right now, I think we need to, is anyone going to make this motion to waive the policy, to have this discussion? I don't feel like, I see the things in writing, the things that are coming. I know when policy committee is going to meet. I also would love to hear from leadership on what their recommendations to the policy would be, especially in their first year. I would like for them to have the opportunity to assess and to bring back their recommendations because they are the ones who are actually doing the committee. So I don't know if they are going to agree or disagree with any of what is here, what kind of ramifications those could make. We could discuss it now, or we could discuss it in policy committee. Should I just go ahead and make the motion? I make the motion, well, to waive the policy 2231 in order to discuss policy 7215. You have to second it and then we vote, right? Okay, so I just made the motion.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. In order to waive a district policy, according to policy 2450, suspension of board policies, there has to be a 2/3 vote of board members to go ahead and waive that policy. Is there,
Yeah, so we're having discussion.
that's what I was,
Yeah.
is there more discussion?
Yeah, yeah. So,
Okay, you want to speak?
yes, please.
Ms. Byer?
When you have a chance. I appreciate the robust discussion that we have started to have. I would welcome clarification on next steps with this policy. From my understanding, we have one more meeting of the policy committee, which is, help me out, I'm bad with dates, next week, right? Right?
21st.
May 21st. May 21st. It's a 2-hour meeting where, Ms. Cardotten, the items that you described, seclusion and restraint, code of student conduct, clearly need significant time. We have the board retreat on the 20th. I don't know if all 7 of us are able to attend that. And I haven't seen whether we have time on the agenda for discussion. And I would welcome discussion and understanding from you all whether you think it would be helpful to this process to at least clarify the conflict that it continues to exist between these two policies prior to the start of certification or the next meet and confer cycle. I haven't heard that from you all. And when I've talked to all my colleagues, when I talked to President Tweetmeyer, when I talked to you, Dr. Lewis, I bring all of this with a spirit of solidarity and good intent. I took time to say what could be tweaked in a minor way. And I have already seen some social media posts calling me shameless and questioning my integrity. That's fine. Like, folks got to do what folks are going to do. But that name calling and adversarial spirit is never collaborative within our progressive community. And so I hoped that folks would be appreciative of the time and effort to at least make some suggestions on the table that are minor and that would reduce the existing conflict between those policies. So I'm unclear from this brief discussion and from Chair Umstead not being able to join us, what happens next with this conflict between existing policies that the board has written?
All right, and I haven't shared yet, so I will go ahead and share. We have a motion on the table. And that motion is to waive policy 2231 in order to discuss or to consider policy 7215 for discussion. I oppose this waiving of policy because I too think that we should follow our existing policy to allow for discussion of policies in policy committee. As noted, we have a very long list of policies that we haven't gotten to yet. And those are important. And you know, last year, we had conversation about, you know, the policy committee in developing that. At least one board member felt that an individual or a small group of people on the board should not work on a policy without agreement of the full board. So we developed a process where the whole board votes on priorities and a tiered list. And we've been working through that very diligently this year. So right now, to my knowledge, this policy has not come with input from administration or the DAE team, as far as I know. I know that I've talked to Dr. Lewis about meet and confer at various times throughout the year, and I have not heard him mention a desired change to policy. It is okay if you would like if you desire a change to policy, but that hasn't been a topic yet. I do know that we have discussed changes to the practice and the procedure and a number of ways in which meet and confer would happen. And I think lots of people have had those conversations. And I think that that's valid. And I look forward to to the changes. This was our first year. There were many learnings. That said, there is obviously some desire to change the policy. And so then the appropriate venue for that would be the policy committee. And there are, one of the policies, of course, the community engagement policy, which those of us who worked on it did get input from about 8, 9, 10 community leaders on that policy before bringing it to the board. But that was circumvented to the policy committee. It's now on a long list of policies
and it won't get dealt with this academic year. I submitted changes to the LGBTQIA plus policy that would strengthen our support for those students. That was pushed to the end of, or the tier 3, not the end of line. Tier 3, we won't get to it this year. I submitted a lactation policy. Even I would say we need, as someone who's regularly pumping, that's why I step out every so often, we could use that, and we won't get to it this year. We have a policy, I submitted a policy change to allow for only one board member to put something on the meeting agenda and it not to require 2. We won't get to that this year. So there's a long list, and then we have, that's just the ones I submitted. So that doesn't include community members, other board members, what have you. And so we haven't had any public comment. Well, we did today. We had one public comment. Before this day, we didn't have public comment or advocacy calling for a change to this policy. Now, we have had changes, reflections and desires to change the format and the practice. And that is something that I know that our leadership of the Meet and Confer team have been working on, and that many of us have been dialoguing about as well. So obviously, all board members have a right, as do community members, to request a look at potential changes to policies. But we have a process that allows for a deep dive by the policy committee, fine tuning of wording, and then it goes to the full board. That's what's happening in just a few minutes with 5 policies, 4 policies. And so then it comes to the full board for that conversation. So last year, we spent a whole year developing the Meet and Confer policy. It took a lot of time. I would like us to have this, discussed in policy committee through the process we've created. And I'll just say it's not fair. I don't think it's fair to push one policy to the front of the line. Who gets to do that? And what is it, what is the reason for that? So I will stop there. Any other discussion?
I do have some discussion. I think who gets to make a decision about your question around who gets to make a decision about what policies come to the agenda. I think we all have our board policies and access to our board policies and understand how to use them to get things on the agenda, whichever agenda is the case. I think we have heard from folks in community about asking us to make some change to that, and it's okay for us to respond to that. And that there were multiple people that made comments about Meet and Confer today, not just one, and they did have differing opinions. And I'm glad that there are some people who have, some board members who have been having conversations with leadership from the Meet and Confer committee. That's great. I wonder, are we going to delegate any conversations that we have to get approval from any committees of the board before we start having conversations with each other? I will also acknowledge this is the first time that I heard from President Tweetmeyer about anything that's happened in Meet and Confer personally, and about the advocacy around the changes and the conversations around changes that they were going to implement. But if not for this item being on the agenda, I'm not sure that I would have heard from her. But I don't want this iteration of the board or future iterations of the board to be beholden to getting approval from members of the community for us to have a discussion about anything. Because ultimately, the people elected us, and this is our meeting where we can have conversations that will help us build consensus together about decisions that we need to make. I would love to hear from each of you about each of the changes that Ms. Byer has recommended so that I can share my thoughts about it as well, because there are some things that I have questions about. And without hearing from you, I don't feel comfortable saying, yeah, let's put this on the policy committee agenda for the 21st, because what I want the product to come out of policy committee to be, what I think we should all want the product that comes out of policy committee to be, is something that we have consensus around. And if we just send it without discussion, then the only people who have voice in that space are the committee members. So if the board says, send it there, do it on the 21st in this conversation right now, y'all do it, it comes back, we're still back at the same drawing table or the board table to have a conversation about what changes board members absolutely want to see. And I also think that we have a responsibility to any ERO, not just the AE, to have a clear set policy by the 31st so that if any ERO should want to certify, that they can do so based on the standards that the board sets should we modify in that interim. That's just my take. Would love to hear from y'all. If you don't want to tell me, you don't want to tell the public, it's okay. Take it to policy committee, have the conversation, decide what next steps are. I look forward to when it comes back to the board table, hopefully before May 31st.
Okay, Ms. Byer, and we've spent about maybe 45 minutes on this, so we'll try to move a little bit.
I really appreciate the time and thoughtful discussion. I am so appreciative that Dr. Lewis took the time to survey members, all of our staff that were there at Meet and Confer. And I appreciate you sharing those survey results with us. And I know you and I have had conversations in one-on-ones, as you probably have with others, about what some improvements might be. But I sit here wishing that we had your feedback and also feeling that you're not able to freely speak about what could improve it. What I sensed was from staff as we, the board, added policy committee and legislative steering committee, as well as meet and confer committees to your cabinet's responsibilities. Massive shifts in what y'all have to staff on our behalf this year. Massive. What I felt was some tension and difficulty when you had 2 meetings a month for meet and confer. I felt like, whoa, head spinning, we're here again. That I felt like we could help fix that before next year. And these are policies that can only be adjusted by the board. They can't be adjusted by you. You're not going to be comfortable saying it's too much or help. I don't think we've made you that space to be able to give us that feedback, but I appreciate the survey. I thought that the facilitator idea, actually, y'all had discussed some before, and I thought your team would welcome. I pulled it from original DAE draft when they brought it to begin with. It's neutral. It could be a labor person that comes in and really understands labor, but where both sides, y'all could hear each other better. That was my idea for an improvement of the collaborative spirit that I know that you all want in that space and that DAE wants. And then I wanted clarity, I wanted clarity for the folks, the 26 employees that are all ours, or the boards, the future boards at that table about what happens when policy recommendations come out. Where do they go? It's not clear yet. It's not. And so this is my starting point for discussion. And I feel like we need your feedback, but you aren't able to give it. I'm uncomfortable asking you to give it, and I don't know what to do with that. I sit here like feeling like we all would be better informed, and should be.
And just, I see Ms. Harold Goff. We are discussing the waiving of policy 2020-31 in order to consider policy 7215 for discussion.
Yeah.
Ms. Harold Goff.
I did want to mention that that was on the table. I also acknowledge that it's been 45 minutes and we've been talking about whether or not to discuss it. We could have spent that 45 minutes in discussion already. I just want to apologize that, you know, that we're even at this particular position. It's very hard to figure out what to do when we keep flip-flopping on things, you know, and we were in this same position a while ago. So we can acknowledge that, you know, it's not consistent. And since it's being brought up, 45 minutes, I don't want to spend another, you know, or if we need to either vote on whether or not to have the discussion, or we have to do that anyway. So can we call the vote? Is that how you do that? Call the vote.
Yes. All right, and then, all right, then, since it's been called, then we'll go ahead and take a vote. So all those in favor of waiving policy 2231 in order to consider policy 7215 for discussion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
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 All right, the motion does not pass. I would like to ask Dr. Lewis if you would like to speak on it now.
Yeah, absolutely. And my microphone does work, and I don't mind speaking freely about this, as I was definitely one of the participants around the table at Meeting Confer. And absolutely, there definitely does need to be some shifts in terms of the structure, frequency of the meetings. And I have shared that with all board members doing my one-on-ones as well. We are still continuing to dig in the survey, the feedback that we administered to the Meeting Confer committee, the 13 DAE members, as well as the 13 DPS Meeting Confer members, and some of the concerns that I expressed, and I'll just share with those: the frequency of the meetings, the structure of the meetings, as well as the need for a facilitator. Some of that is indeed validated, I guess you would say, in the survey data. Survey data is positive. Some believe that it can only get better, which I certainly agree with that sentiment as well. And I think it's an opportunity for us after year one, to really reflect and see how we can improve upon that. There were some frustrations, and I haven't looked at the survey. The only identifiers we had in the survey were you're a DAE member or a DPS member. I haven't looked at the survey data by a membership yet, but I do sense some frustration from some potential, I'll say, committee members about administration being prepared for those meetings, and that may indeed speak to the frequency of the meetings, because as I shared in the development of this policy, when we're talking about the frequency of meetings, that there needs to be, the realization is that the work happens at the meetings, but the bulk of the work happens between the meetings. And so we need time to make sure that we are able to deliver, and we owe it to our staff to ensure that we are delivering at those meetings. And so in addition to the work and the feedback and the action steps from those Meeting Confer meetings, we are working on that and running a full district. And so, I'm looking forward to the board engaging in conversations around this Meeting Confer policy that administration has to operationalize along with DAE at those Meeting Confer meetings. But yeah, I certainly am looking forward to that. And I think that will definitely get to the sentiments of it can only get better. But my opinion, what we cannot do is continue the way that it has been done. As some respondents in the survey did indicate, that they felt it'll be a little bit more honest in terms of a dialogue if it wasn't in such a large setting there as well. So any questions for me, or we're ready to move on?
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. I appreciate that. And also, I want to apologize. I didn't mean to misrepresent you. You did speak about the frequency of meetings, and I didn't interpret that as a policy change, but that would indeed be a policy change. So thank you. So in light of the fact that there is a desire to work on this policy by administration, board, and community members, I would like to refer it to the policy committee. That doesn't mean we will get to it this year because we have one more meeting and we have 2 hours and we have already an agenda. But it will go to the policy committee and the policy committee will continue.
Can that be a motion?
Yes, I move to refer this policy to the meet and confer policy to the policy committee.
I would second if it's able, if you'd consider a friendly amendment of actually setting aside time on the agenda to discuss the feedback that Dr. Lewis shared.
That would not be my,
Let me make it sound friendly. It's a friendly amendment to just set aside 15, 20 minutes of the agenda to actually discuss the feedback that's shared.
On the 21st?
Yeah.
what is on the agenda already for the 21st?
And with the understanding that this already got kicked from the previous retreat agenda. I mean, didn't get touched at it.
But also when it was on the agenda, the purpose was to clarify the interaction with the between the meet and confer policy and the policy committee policy. It wasn't to discuss all of the different items in the meet and confer policy. The meet and confer policy, in my interpretation, wasn't on the list. It was a discussion of process. So
You and I discussed that, and I had a totally different understanding of why it was on there, because
Right.
it specifically of the tension between these two existing policies needs to be addressed, but
okay, then I would ask Ms. Cardotton as the policy committee chair, what is on the agenda for next Thursday?
So the content of the agenda for next Thursday largely depends on the actions taken by the board this evening. Not only with regards to this, but I'm more speaking with the other policies that are on the agenda this evening. So if this board, for example, were to discuss 4326 about seclusion and restraint and pass it back to policy committee, that will end up on the policy committee agenda. If the student code of conduct discussion ends up with directing that back to policy committee, the board could do other things with those policies. But when in my discussion with Dr. Pittman, who's the staff liaison, and building this agenda, we've kind of created some space. And what we also, in order to maintain integrity of the process, what I've discussed with her is in whichever way these were tiered, again, the vote from the board that ordered them, I want to maintain that tiering. So that's how they're currently on the agenda, which is the live version of the agenda that everybody has access to. So it's basically to pick up on where we left off in tier 2 and what we had decided for tier 2. And this item, the tandem relationship between these two policies and any potential conflicts between the two is on the agenda, but it's not being bumped up higher than other agenda items. And I'll note too that of the changes that I've seen proposed in 7215, only one of them is about the tandem relationship between those two policies. So
Can I ask a point of clarification around that? 'Cause it sounds like my understanding of policy committee was that when we discussed particular policies in policy committee, we were looking at them holistically and not just based on individual pieces. This is the second time that I've heard this idea that this particular item is not what was tiered by the board. And because my request when we were talking about our relationship with law enforcement and the impact of immigration stuff was that we have a conversation about a dress code around what adult visitors could wear to school and include that in the policy. But I was told that that couldn't be included in the policy in keeping our schools safe from law enforcement because that was not the nature of the submission of the policy. And so I didn't understand that as a board member, when community members were submitting policy considerations, that it had to be specific to or verbatim to a particular subject or word, et cetera, or specific lines. And so I want to know what other policies would we look at not holistically and look at line by line? So will we take, there were some restorative practice amendments to the student code of conduct that were introduced since the policy committee meeting that weren't there. What would we not look at that whole policy as a collective? Like, would we not look through every line and every policy? And if we are limiting ourselves, then we're going to continue to see conflict in policies. I don't know. I just want clarification around why we would only look at one piece of a policy.
Ms. Cardotton?
That's not the case at all. The 7215 was never submitted to the policy committee through either the August nor the February submission periods. So it's frankly just by special request that this even ended up on the retreat agenda. It is not officially a tiered policy. So of course we would consider a policy not just one piece or not in isolation. And if we want to revisit the policy committee policy, or if this board does in future meetings, then I think maybe they should to revisit the tiering process and the prioritization process and timeline. That's possible, but as currently written, I'm doing my best to follow and maintain integrity of the process that this board agreed upon. And full integrity of that process would not allow this policy to be on the policy committee agenda at all, unless we direct it tonight.
So other comments or?
Natalie offered a friendly amendment to your motion
Yes,
where we are.
if there are no more comments right now, then my comment would be that Meet and Confer does not begin to meet until October. The policy committee gathers recommendations by August 31st and tiers them in September. And so there would be an opportunity to begin working on the Meet and Confer policy if it was tiered at the top by the policy committee in the coming academic year at the end of September or the beginning of October. And furthermore, the idea of a facilitator, I don't believe is the
We're not
policy.
discussing the merit of the changes though, right? Because we just voted not to discuss the policy.
Okay, so what I was saying was the facilitator is not necessarily precluded by the policy doesn't prohibit all of these things. Some things would need to be changed in policy, some things in practice.
So you want to be allowed to discuss your take on the policy, but the rest of us can't?
So what I was doing was saying why I was not accepting the friendly amendment and giving more context. And people have commented about the changes suggested through this discussion. But now, so I'm not accepting the friendly amendment because I think it should be referred for the
Thank
coming
you.
academic year.
I would,
I would just reflect to all of us as we sit in a place where we look to improve, that I hope that there is some way to bring clarity to something that we noticed as we went through this year. And when I heard Dr. Lewis's comments, I heard specifically about the schedule of meetings, which is defined by policy. And I heard a willingness of a facilitator. And I heard the tension that continues to address. And while this can be kicked down the road and it doesn't make clear to the folks that are certifying by the 31st what the schedule of meetings will be and what the expectations on central office staff will be. So,
I'm very curious as to
Harrell,
how we, do we need a second?
Yes.
Okay, I second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded to refer policy 7215 to the policy committee. Is there any other discussion?
I just want to
Ms.
share.
Rogers?
Yeah, I just want to share that I will not support this because that's for the next board to decide. Because the retiering is going to happen, so I'm voting against this because the referral to the policy committee doesn't do anything between now and May 31st.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Yay.
It passes 3-2. And now we will move to the next item. Policy Committee. The first item, Policy Committee update, is from information only. B is 4240/7312, Child Abuse Reports and Investigations for first read, and I will now hand it over to Dr. King. Thank you. Am I referring, I'm sorry, Dr. King is listed, but I can hand it over to Dr. Pittman.
Thank you. The policy committee met on this child abuse reports and investigations. They spoke about in section D, the duty to report of our licensed employees to the state board, and it clarifies that the administrators must report the 3 specific categories of misconduct involving our licensed employees, including misconduct involving physical injury, or sexual contact with a child, misconduct justifying automatic revocation of the employee's license, and misconduct resulting in certain criminal charges when misconduct results in the termination of employment, non-renewal of an employment contract, suspension without pay, disciplinary action, or resignation. In section H of the policy, child abuse and neglect information and resources for students was also lifted up, and the administration was presenting this policy for reading for board review and discussion on first reading.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Pittman. Board members, Vice Chair Rogers.
I'd like to offer a motion to approve the changes to policy 4240 and 7312 as recommended by administration to come back for consideration for second read at the board meeting on May 28th.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Vice Chair Rogers and seconded by Ms. Harold Goff to approve policy 4240/7312 for a first read to come back
at the monthly meeting for May. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Tab, was that an aye? Yeah, okay. It was
Question.
approved 6-0. Oh, sorry.
Question, would you like that back on discussion or consent?
Board members, and actually, I'm sorry, all those not in favor, please say nay. Okay, passes 6-0. Board members, is there a desire for it to be on consent or for discussion?
I'd like it on consent.
All right, I'm seeing thumbs up for consent. Consent? Are you all okay with consent? All right. Yes, consent. Thank you. All right, the next one is item C, policy 5150, 7313, reporting to external agencies. And for this one, I will pass it to Dr. King.
This one you'll pass to Dr. King. Thank you,
All
and
right.
I will take it this time.
Okay.
And thank you to Dr. Pittman for taking the last one. Board members, this actually is a new policy. And essentially, this policy outlines the various scenarios wherein the superintendent is required to report specific information to external government agencies and officials. The policy is essentially a consolidation and a restatement of those responsibilities that exist in a plethora of policies throughout the board's policy manual. We have reviewed the policy and do ask for this policy to go forward for first reading for board review. Would note, board members, that we are quite aware that passage of this policy will obviously require us to take a closer look at some additional policies just to make sure we maintain compliance going forward.
First, board members. Yes, Vice Chair Rogers.
So I see this policy went to the policy committee. Is there a report from the policy committee as to why this is not on consent?
Ms. Cardotton, would you like to respond or?
It's my recollection that it was the preference of administration who brought this policy to us to have it not be on consent. Because we do discuss that with every policy we work through. We try to put as many on consent at policy committee and at the board as possible.
Okay, and I saw a nod from Dr. Pittman. Ms. Byer?
Are we at 5150?
Yeah.
It was my recollection also that in light of issues that have been in the district this year, that we would be as transparent as possible about making updates to this and the one prior with the community, that we would just kind of, I see Ms. Carter-Otten nodding, so I think that was some of the thought process of just bring it in a more transparent and more open way.
All right, other comments, questions?
I move approval of this policy 5150/7313 on first read and with a motion to bring it back on consent for the May board meeting.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded by Ms. Carter-Otten and Ms. Byer to bring back, to approve for first read policy 5150/7313 and bring it back in the May monthly meeting. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. All right, it passes 6-0. And the next item is policy 4326, rules for use of seclusion and restraint in schools. And so I will pass it to Dr. Pittman.
I'll start. Just-
Sorry, I'll pass it to
No
Dr. King.
worries, we're
Trying to-
playing volleyball over
Yeah.
here. Board members, this policy, obviously, 4326 is one that is, you have had quite a bit of conversation about through the policy committee. Certainly a good deal of discussion last year when this policy was initially revised. I believe at this point, the board might want to continue to have some additional conversation. We do have Executive Director for Elementary Schools Programs, Vavrusig, here to provide some ability to answer questions relative to specific questions that board members might have, specifically around how this policy would impact students who are part of our exceptional children's policy, but would want to also note that the policy is a policy that impacts all students as it relates to restraints and seclusion. So with that, I'll pass it back to board members for any discussion you might have.
Thank you, Dr. King. Board members? Ms. Byer?
I think I'm so appreciative of the Durham Advocates for Exceptional Children and the time they've taken to dig into these policies. I think they've met with several of us and have provided written documentation on some suggested improvements in an ongoing way. They also, in my conversation with them, Dr. Lewis, were so appreciative of you and your willingness to meet with them, but also your clear background in working with exceptional students with exceptional needs. But I think their ideas were extensive. And when I spoke with them earlier, I asked them to consider sending the written materials to Policy Committee Chair Carta Otten to consider sending those ahead to Tharrington Smith to see if any of them could be ready for further discussion with his review ahead of time. And I didn't know if they had done that already or if you'd received that and if that was a good way to proceed as we share their feedback with Policy Committee, but also with staff to expedite some of the work so that it's not so a very long policy.
Yeah, thanks for that suggestion. And we have done that with most of the policies we've looked at. I can't remember if we've sent specifically the most recent feedback from Durham Advocates for Exceptional Children to the attorney that supports us in the policy committee, but I think that's a great idea. I love where the direction they're going in. I know that I've made suggestions that are aligned with that, and I know that Jason, our attorney, has provided us with some feedback, but I think we'll see what he can get us before our next policy committee meeting to kind of expedite that conversation to see if there are any legal concerns with the recommendations.
Ms. Harold-Goff?
Thank you. Is there a way, like, can we take a couple of minutes to see if we can, as a board, articulate some of the discussions that we've had with the Durham Committee of for Exceptional Children? No, Siri, I'm not talking to you. Can we try to articulate some of that or unpack some of that as a board, so that we can use some of that time for that right now? So one thing that I remember coming from those conversations is around there was some language that was soft. What's the word for it? It wasn't like it may or something like that I gotta remember, oh my gosh. Let me come back to that one. The idea that what would keep us from not having there was some conversation in policy committee around seclusion and restraints, including like seatbelts and things, that are not necessarily like the intention of that was different from like seclusion and restraint that we're communicating in this policy. So there was that. I remember that came up. And so having language in the policy that can delineate the difference and still say that, to be very clear about, we don't want any of this those kinds of restraints, and when and how they should be used. So there was that. And I would love to hear from other board members. There were several things. Can we articulate as a board what we have collected, the things that are important to bring back if we wanted to send this back to policy committee. That's one thing I remember.
Okay.
Let me see if I can grab my notes and figure out the other ones.
Okay, thank you. So suggestion to kind of throw out the areas where we are interested to maybe align to some of the recommended changes.
Right.
Okay. Other board members' comments? Okay. Okay, Ms. Cardon.
Well, a couple other things that came up both in the policy committee retreat and in multiple conversations with Durham Advocates for Exceptional Children is the reporting to parents, what's reported and when. And I think we've seen some improvement in the latest version of the policy, but as I think it was Dr. Lewis that had flagged in our policy committee retreat that if a student is restrained, verbal notification on that day is ideal. And I think I'd like to return to that. Right now, the current version of the policy leaves room for that day or the following. And I believe this applies to both the seclusion and restraint. But that's one thing that does feel really important to me. If it were we notify parents of all sorts of things on the same day, right? If your kid gets suspended or for other reasons. So that feels important. So same day verbal notification. And I think generally I'd like to tighten up the notification in the policy, both notification to parents and in some cases to principals, and just really make it, if it's restraint that's being used in a supportive way or an assistive way. So a wheelchair, for example, a strap on that, a guiding hand to walk down the hallway. Of course, parents don't need a report on that, but all else feels, as a parent of children, I would like to know about that. And I understand why there's a request coming from our parents who have exceptional children that they would like to be notified of those types of things. And notified as soon as possible. You don't know when your child comes home what they've endured that day, if they've been sitting in a room by themselves for an hour, or if someone has had to hold them down physically. And you need to know those things to be able to respond both to their emotional needs, but also to their physical needs when they get home at the end of the day.
Thank you. I'll say I'm also interested in expanding the reporting and and further clarifying the data reported to the board, disaggregated data reported to the board. So we can, do you want to discuss more, or we can see if we have consensus around those areas as areas of interest to be explored, or go ahead and refer it back, if appropriate, to the policy committee. Are other people interested in the reporting and notification piece? Mr. Tab, you want to speak?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with the reporting. So more reporting is always better for me.
Okay, thank you. Other folks? Vice Chair Rogers?
So reporting to the parents or reporting to the board?
Reporting to the board.
So
And then we can look at how we would structure it going forward. Whether it should be extended to others.
I'm in favor of more reporting to the board. I have questions. Maybe this was answered while I stepped out, but my questions are, is there any data around what the notifications to parents, the average notification to parents is right now?
I don't think there is any that has been prepared. I think we could use the reports that we have, the written reports to parents, to go back and probably tease that out. But I don't think it's something that we've tracked purposefully in the past.
So how would you monitor if the notification has been issued in 2 days?
You know, in honesty, I think there's two responses to that. One would be like, many of the things that we do, we place these items in policy and expect our administrators to comply and expect them to do that work. Obviously, we could structure a system that required them to report to district staff that they have reported, if that would be the board's desire. But generally, as it relates to these matters, what we do is we place the expectation in policy, and we trust that our administrators comply with those directives.
Okay. I'm concerned about us putting time-sensitive requests in policy like this. If we're not monitoring, if there's no process to monitor that, to ensure that that's happening. I'm also nervous about adding one more thing to the plate of our teachers and our administrators that would be a hurdle or challenge to intervene in some instances. But I would like the administration to start collecting data around when parents are contacted after an incident so that that can be reported to the board. And should the board take issue with the reporting windows or see issue, and administration, right? See issue with the reporting issues over a period of time, can make adjustments as needed.
Okay. Sorry. Right, Mr. Ramon.
Can I just mention one thing that Jason mentioned to me is, and I think Ms. Chavez started with this, is that, this policy applies to all of your students, and that, one of the reasons for the next day is that, if you have a big fight at school and kids get separated, I mean, a lot of that separation of kids would fall within seclusion or restraint within this policy, and that if the principal is supposed to, you got 20 kids that were in a fight, and you've got to then notify 20 parents at the end of the school day, that could maybe be a little bit unrealistic or very difficult for a principal to do. So anyway, it's just something to think about, at least in terms of why he told me that the next day was something that may be really beneficial for the administration and making sure that they're still timely responding and complying with the policy. So anyway, I just throw that out for discussion. But if it's going back to policy committee, he'll be there to discuss it with you anyway.
Other, Ms. Harold Goff.
I would be interested in wording that could delineate those two situations so that in all other situations that, where it's not a big, what are the situations where the parent is notified, immediately or within that particular, within the day and not the next day. There's one situation I'm thinking of in particular where a child was caught up in a fight and, parent didn't even know, until several days later. That gives that child enough time to go home and stew and everything and have all the different reactions. And then add our special needs and our, other children who are dealing with other things on top of, those things on top of that, it escalates it even further with the kinds of psychological reactions and things that parents have to deal with at home because they didn't know that something happened during the school day. So I think there's a way to, again, it requires more language. It'll make the policy longer, but I think we really need to clearly delineate that in the policy some kind of way. Because there are also other situations where I don't feel like we should wait a whole day before requiring those things that families be notified.
Ms. Byer.
So I appreciate all the suggestions that we're lifting up, ways to notify families sooner than 30 days, which is what's written in there. I mean, that is a way too long window, in my opinion. I love the suggestion that we consider how we talk about isolation differently and whether that's ever appropriate, particularly with students with special needs. I loved their suggestion that we consider, could we explicitly say taping and tying are completely prohibited in Durham Public Schools? Like, I loved almost all of their suggestions. That's why I was suggesting that in order to expedite and save time, that we see, Jason and Dr. Lewis and Dr. King have that document and have a good stab at what we can push forward. I think Jason has learned how progressive this board is and how we try to do the most. And I think he's gotten so great at threading the needle of difficult things along with us, and that has saved us a tremendous amount of time in policy committee. So I'd welcome that kind of approach. Just holistically looking at their suggestions and telling us what we can and can't do, or if any current concerns he has, and the administration has.
So then is there consensus around that approach and passing on that document and having them look? We had some, conversation about the notification to parents, how that might differ. We might have different options for that. Notification around or reporting to the board. It sounds like we're pretty much have consensus on that. But there are other things, the isolation, banning some particular types of restraints explicitly. Do we have consensus around sending the document from our community partners, DEAC, to administration and our attorney? Okay. Oh. Yeah, okay, cool. So we'll do that. We'll send it you all's way, and then we'll see what you all come up with and discuss next week. Ms. Harold Goff.
Also, when we send this back to policy committee, I'd like to, more discussion about, I know there's some debate around whether we need the isolation or restraint at all for our special needs kids. I'd like to, I don't think that we need those kinds of tactics with our special needs kids at all, or do we need to better define what that looks like in the policy? So that's something that I would like to bring back for discussion when this goes back to policy committee.
Okay, do you think, maybe it will, maybe you'll be able to bring those concerns to policy committee and then we can, yeah.
Just wanted
discuss
to
them.
voice it.
Thank you. Thank you. And so, Ms. Rogers.
I just have a question. I don't disagree with the plan to move it forward. My question is the expectation that Dr. Lewis, Dr. King, and Jason will work on this before the policy committee meeting on the 21st and have a document then, or are they needing more time than that?
Dr. King?
Yes, they are needing more time than that.
But we also have to get this done for July year-round school start and policy update and handbook stuff and training.
I think that's also a constraint. Respectfully, I guess my concern is I really don't know how extensive the documents that DEAC have shared are. I also don't know, I do know that it's Thursday, and I don't know what other items are. I mean, today is Thursday. Right, and I don't know what Jason's schedule is like over the next couple of days, whether or not we can expect him to dedicate the amount of time it might require to review that and prepare a document in what would essentially be 2 business days.
All right, so Ms. Cardotten.
So I think that the bulk of what they're asking for, I put into questions that you, Dr. King, have responded to already, that Q&A document that was posted publicly at not our retreat, but our policy committee meeting. So we have some initial responses from administration on each of the different points that they've offered up, or if not all, then most of them, which means that asking Attorney Weber to weigh in on as many as he can before the next policy committee meeting, I think is reasonable. And those he can't get to, he can weigh in on during the policy committee meeting. Frankly, this is because we have such tight turnaround between meetings where we're always faced with the same exact issue. So thank you for naming it. It is an issue. So I'm just going to ask him to do his best and what he can. Does that feel comfortable or what?
Yeah, my apologies. I assumed that we were talking about a new set of documents or new information that the organization had sent over. If it is largely this material, I mean, I think we've already gone through it and contemplated, most of the items that would be involved there.
Yeah, okay, and thank you. And then we will do our best, and then that will be the last policy committee meeting and for this year. So,
I will point out that, and Jason can obviously work with Jessica between now and the next meeting, but it's my understanding from the meeting we had this afternoon that the draft that you have is his most aggressive review of what was recommended and what he's comfortable recommending to the board. But either way, you can talk to Jason yourself during the week, so that's fine.
all right, Ms. Cardon, any other comment?
Just to say, this is, yes, Attorney Weber has proposed some suggestions in response to many of these. And I think this is kind of our cadence of how we work as then we ask him to go further and then he tells us how comfortable he is with going further. And there's a back and forth that usually moves things a little bit in the other direction and he protects us.
Well, that's what we love about Jason. So you're in good hands.
All right.
Okay, sorry.
Ms.
And then
Raffles?
then it'll come back to the board. Will it be for second read?
What? Okay.
Even
Dr.
though the
Lewis says yes.
document's going to be modified, could be modified significantly?
It will still be a second read because this is a first read. Yes.
Okay.
Multiple
the board-
administrator, Dr. Lewis.
Then we'll have to deal with it. Okay, okay.
All right. And of course, all board members and everyone in the universe is invited to our policy committee meeting this coming Thursday at 11:30 here at Fuller. Okay. All right. So with that, we will go on to our last item under policy committee. Policy 4301. Oh, let me back up. Okay. I will take a motion.
I move approval of policy 4326, rules for use of seclusion and restraint in schools, first read.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Ms. Harold Goff, seconded by Ms. Byer. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Passes 6-0. And with that, we will move on to policy 4301, student code of conduct, both elementary and secondary policies for first read. Ms. Sidbury, or Dr. King? Ms. Sidbury.
Good evening, Vice Chair Rogers, Facilitator Chavez, board members, Dr. Lewis, Cabinet, and our Durham community. My name is Chanel Sidbury. I serve as the Assistant Superintendent of Continuous Improvement in School Supports. I have with me two esteemed colleagues, Dr. Laverne Maddox-Perry, Senior Executive Director of Student Support Services, and Dr. Melissa Watson, Director of Student Alternatives and Support. The title of our presentation is From Policy to Impact. So we want to walk you through a comprehensive understanding of where we are as an organization, the policy changes, implementation adjustments, as well as feedback from our administrators and principals. This work is about outcomes, not just policy changes. We are aligning our policy practice and accountability to ensure that they are improving student outcomes. Today, we're going to talk about how the policy changes suggested will help us to drive changes in adult behavior and how that influences student impacts. Next slide, please, Jamin. This slide is an overview. We are going to walk you through 5 key areas tonight very quickly. Of our current state and what the data tells us about it, what policy changes, what has changed in the policy and why, what will look different in schools by grade span, how those changes are going to improve outcomes for our students, how we will monitor and our progress and ensure accountability. This structure tonight is comprehensive. We want to be transparent with the Board of Education and our greater community about where we're going as a district, be transparent about our data and what we need to do next. This structure directly responds to the board's request for clarity on impact and accountability. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Maddox Perry, who will walk you through the progress we have made thus far and the gaps that we must address with these policy revisions. Dr. Maddox Perry.
Thank you, Ms. Sidbury. Good evening, Dr. Lewis, Chair Umstead, in your absence, Vice Chair Rogers, the full board, and the DPS broader community. This slide depicts data presented that reflects the 2025-26 school year and is current as of May 7th and 8th of 2026. District-wide, we've seen approximately a 16% year-over-year decrease in incidents and suspensions. In early grades, we continue to see a downward trend in suspensions over time with a current rate of 1.5%. At the same time, disproportionality remains a significant concern. Students with disabilities are disproportionately represented in pre-K grade 2 suspension data. Black students also remain disproportionately represented across grades K2. The most common short-term suspension categories in early grades involve physical aggression and fighting, serious disruptive behavior, and noncompliance or disrespect of others. These trends reinforce the board's ongoing concerns regarding equitable implementation and our use of exclusionary disciplinary practices. This work is not simply about reducing suspensions numerically. It is about improving consistency, equity, and student outcomes through more calibration and professional learning. Our appeals data shows variability in decision-making as we are seeing increasing level 1 appeals and long-term suspension or reassignment recommendations for various infractions, which signals to us inconsistency in some of our decision-making. That recognition is what has led teams to pursue revisions to Policy 4301 to lessen variability in responses to behavior violations across our schools. Next slide, please. Keeping students in school is the foundation for improving outcomes. Students learn behavior the same way they learn academics, through instruction and feedback, and we must teach appropriate behaviors. Research shows restorative practices improve in all the areas we are targeting as a district: attendance, behavior, and academic achievement. So these revisions you'll read tonight are centered around restorative practices, and they're not simply about removing natural consequences for behavior infractions, nor are we lowering expectations. We are strengthening how we teach expectations, upholding student accountability for one's actions, and one's role in repairing any harm done within the community due to our behaviors. Next slide, please. At this time, I will shift to Dr. Watson. You go through the remainder of that.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Lewis, and members of the Durham Public Schools community. If you will go to the next slide, please. As part of our work, we embedded restorative practices directly into Policy 4301. In addition, we clarified that suspension is intended to be a last resort. Suspension is appropriate only when there is significant safety concern, substantial disruption, or documented interventions have not been successful. To support greater consistency across schools, administrators are now expected to document prior interventions, justify and confer with district leadership for removal decisions, and consider student context before assigning exclusionary discipline. Policy 4301 establishes district-wide discipline expectations for all students. At the same time, disciplinary decisions involving students with disabilities are also governed by Policy 4307, Section 504 requirements, and all applicable federal and state protections. Additionally, based on board feedback, staff agrees there is value in more explicitly codifying IEP and 504 considerations within Policy 4301 itself to strengthen clarity and alignment. Ultimately, these revisions move us from discretionary decision-making toward clearer and more consistent expectations across schools. Next slide, please. To operationalize these changes, the system is grounded in 3 core implementation structures: administrative response protocols, district behavior matrices, and alternatives to suspension supports. Within this framework, administrators are now required to review and document prior interventions, mitigating factors, and consideration of IEP 504 supports before exclusionary discipline decisions are finalized. As a result, the structure is designed to reduce subjective decision-making and improve consistency across schools. Most importantly, the goal is to ensure decisions are proactive, equitable, and instructional rather than reactive. Next slide, please. Building on that structure, this process requires a structured review before suspension is considered. Administrators must review the incident, analyze prior interventions, consider applicable IEP 504 accommodations and behavioral supports, document rationale, and ensure due process. In addition, suspensions can occur only after investigation, documentation, and consideration of alternatives. The process also requires that administrators document why prior interventions were insufficient and why removal is necessary. Taken together, this process helps reduce inconsistency, strengthen equity, and ensure decisions are not made in isolation before a student's documented supports or needs are considered. Next slide, please. One of the most significant shifts in this work is that we rejected removal with structured intervention options. This slide shows us what happens instead of suspension. It includes a wide range of discipline responses. It's important to emphasize that these are not optional. These are embedded in the response framework. And ultimately, this is a direct response to the board's question of what happens instead. I invite Dr. Maddox Perry to come.
Next slide, please. So we're looking at our approach by grade span. If we take a look at pre-K and 2 approach, the board has expressed a clear interest in prohibiting or significantly limiting exclusionary discipline practices for students in pre-K to the grade 3. And it is important to note that suspension rates in nearly in the early grades are already low and trending downward, as I mentioned before, at 1.5% for all of pre-K grade 2. For example, pre-K currently reflects very few incidents district-wide, 3 out of 725 students enrolled, and kindergarten incidents remain low relative to enrollment as well, 30 out of 2,182. This demonstrates that if we continue our early intervention and restorative supports, we will continue to see positive impacts. DPS staff is working continually with legal counsel, early education leadership, and school teams regarding implementation authority, operational readiness, and support structures to construct the appropriate policy revisions. The current draft does not yet reflect all the board discussion regarding pre-K grade 3 prohibitions, and staff will revise language accordingly during the next revision process. Our goal is to ensure schools have the behavioral, restorative, instructional, and staffing supports necessary to successfully implement these changes. As we look at grades 3 to 5, in this grade band, behavior matrices prioritize intervention before exclusion. Level 1 responses explicitly include restorative conversations, reflection, skill building, and MTSS supports. Suspension is introduced only at higher levels of violation or after escalation and documented interventions. As we look at grade 6-12 approaches, at the secondary level, students have access to more structured intervention and alternative support systems. This includes community-based programs, alternative learning environments, alternative to suspension programming, a full-time school-based restorative practices coordinator, and structured reentry planning. Our goal is to balance accountability with continued student engagement and support. This is our differentiated and developmentally appropriate approach. Next slide, please. How the policy changes translate to student outcomes. This slide represents the connection the board has consistently asked us to make. Each policy shift is intended to change adult practice. Those adult actions are what ultimately improve student outcomes. When adults intervene earlier and restoratively, students build trust and remain engaged in instruction. When root causes are addressed through supports and restorative practices, recidivism decreases. When exclusionary discipline is thoughtful and limited, attendance and connectedness improve. We will provide reflection and pivots that have proven effective in our work, and all our efforts are intended to improve upon consistency, ensure equity, and positively influence long-term student outcomes, not simply demonstrate a reduction in our suspension numbers. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the projected reduction in pre-K grades 2 suspensions when policy revisions are paired with strong implementation practices. As you move from left to right on the slide, you will see the greatest impact occurs when restorative practices, intervention supports, and administrator consistency work together, where the number from this example increases from 4 students being positively impacted to 26 students being positively impacted. This reflects a systems approach we've been working towards for years, not simply a policy change. I do want to note that some of the suspensions currently coded as full-day removals in earlier grades include students leaving briefly to reset and returning the following day. This reinforces the importance of ensuring consistent coding practices and standardized intervention expectations. The district's goal is not only fewer suspensions, but fewer repeat incidents and stronger student supports. Next slide, please. Ensuring equity throughout the decision-making process. Equity checks are embedded into the decision-making process for our discipline. As Dr. Watson highlighted earlier, I want to reiterate that when adults are responding to violations of the Code of Conduct involving students with disabilities, the process requires a mandatory review of IEP and 504 considerations, as well as mandatory consultation processes. The board raised an important concern regarding whether IEP and Section 504 considerations are sufficiently explicit within Policy 4301 itself. Though cross-referenced with Policy 4307, staff agrees that strengthening direct references within Policy 4301 could improve clarity, consistency, and alignment with exceptional children's and Section 504 protections. This work operationalizes equity through the structure, our required documentation, and reciprocal accountability, not just our intentions. Next slide, please. As you've heard over the years, we are doing a lot to address our discipline in regards to what is working. School leaders consistently reported that the district behavior matrices provide stronger clarity and consistency for decision-making across schools. Behavior support assistants have also been identified as particularly impactful in supporting students in grades pre-K to grade 2. In looking at areas for improvement, schools identify significant implementation needs, including more trauma-informed supports, more autism supports, and additional mental health intervention capacity. Leaders expressed concerns regarding staffing limitations and the need for greater flexibility for smaller schools. Some school leaders also noted that implementation protocols can feel rigid without sufficient staffing and intervention capacity. This feedback is directly shaping our next steps in implementation planning, staffing adjustments, and a plan for regional support deployment. Next slide, please. How will we know? How will we measure progress and ensure accountability? As we are implementing a continuous monitoring and improvement process, the district will conduct continued monthly data analyses and embed quarterly reporting to the board. We will focus on monitoring numbers of and reasons for suspensions, repeat incidents, alternatives to suspension, utilization, disproportionality by race and disability status, appeals, and implementation consistency. Quarterly reports will include disaggregated data, not quite yet official, by race, disability status, offense category, grade band, and school level trends. We will also monitor implementation fidelity, including our restorative practices implementation and responses, interventions documentation, and reentry planning practices. This directly responds to the board's request for transparency, more accountability, and data-driven monitoring. Next slide, please. Our philosophy through these revisions is now embedded directly into the policy. We're changing how adults respond to student behavior. This work is intended to help students feel connected to instruction and engaged in their own learning. The district expectation is that structured reentry planning occur following exclusionary discipline responses with supports tailored to the student's individual needs. We also recognize the board's interest in codifying the reentry expectations more explicitly within Policy 4301. And we just want to state that this is a system shift focused on consistency, accountability, and improved student outcomes. I'll now ask Ms. Tidbury to return.
Next slide, please. So again, nuanced here, you will see overarching themes, changing adult behaviors, systems and protocols, reporting, data analysis. And so this graphic on this slide is kind of where we are with these policy revisions. More structure creates more consistency, more monitoring creates more consistency, and those things will support us with improved outcomes for our students. Next slide, please. This slide is directly from our May principals meeting where we reviewed this policy with all Durham Public Schools district staff and principals. That was about a week or so ago. And we discussed explicitly around these policy changes, implementation, how that aligns with school execution and what staff leaders would need to make these key shifts in our implementation of this policy. We also want to make sure that we engage staff. So while we did get feedback from district staff and principals, teachers are the ones that are going to have to feel how this implementation, this policy change happens at the classroom level. And so we want to make sure we embed that as well. And we want to make sure that we have the time to plan and provide professional learning so that we enter next year with clarity and readiness. This is how we will cultivate this shared ownership around these policy adjustments at the school level and with our school community. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to read these to you, but these are our immediate actions in response to, next slide, Jamie. I'm not going to read these to you, but these are our next steps in terms of how we move from policy to development to implementation. Our focus, as you have heard, is going to be how we work to ensure this consistency across our schools. Prior to final implementation, we want to gather more support from principals, more support from teachers and school-based leaders and staff so that we strengthen our operational readiness and how we're going to implement this with clarity. We also want to have summer professional learning around this, so that we can be clear around restorative expectations, intervention processes, documentation requirements, all the things that we discussed in the policy. We want to be very clear about that in our work. We also want to continue to identify and scale best practices that are already having positive outcomes across our schools. Some of our schools are already doing this work well. And so if it ain't broke, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. And we want to leverage that support as well. As a result, we're going to continue to use our principals' feedback. They're asking us to expand behavioral and restorative supports where possible. They're also asking us to increase trauma-informed and mental health supports at the school level for students and also professional learning from staff, asking explicitly for us to continue to strengthen our partnership with the Exceptional Children's Department led by Dr. Bell and her esteemed team, so that we can strengthen autism and disability-related supports as well as our learning and understanding of those things. And also our smaller schools were very loud in making sure that we know they need differentiated supports with how this policy shows up when you have a very small number of staff. So in general, we're going to use our regional discipline data on an ongoing basis to identify trends, target interventions, provide additional support where we see disproportionality persisting. We are reducing our discipline, but we also want to make sure we reduce that disproportionality. Next slide, please. So as I close out for the benediction, we just want to say implementation consistency is where we are falling short. And so we want to make sure that before we roll this out, and I hate that phrase, but roll it out, that we get administrative feedback and buy-in and staff buy-in, operational guidance on what these things are going to these policy changes, how they're going to translate to staffing needs at the school level, and want to make sure that we're very clear on the board direction. Additional work is underway. There's some implications at the pre-K level in terms of some of our pre-Ks are ours, some of them are other agencies, and what does that oversight and governance look like at both the state and federal level? We have to be make sure our policy doesn't overstep in those arenas because we are including pre-K. And we're strengthening systems also for our families and communication around transparency, around our disciplinary decisions and intervention. So thank you for your time. I know that was a little bit long, but we wanted to take our time and walk through all of the changes, all the implementation. This is hard work and students are at the center. So it's our due diligence to be clear, thoughtful, and in consideration of how this plays out for our teachers, our principals, district leaders, and operationally with what we can provide schools to make this work. So we take your questions and comments.
Thank you very much. As they say, the proof is in the pudding, so we can see different results even from 2-3 years ago. So it's really very striking. Thank you for your work and your presentation. And now, board members, this is on our agenda for discussion and action as a first read. Ms. Byer, and then Ms. Cardon.
So first, I want to thank you for moving this policy and practice light years ahead. It is very much needed. And want to be clear, you all made it sound like you need some more time, like with stakeholder feedback internally before the board is to pass this. Does that mean that you want to is that on the wording of the policy or more of the implementation and the processes? Like, are you seeing that you would get more feedback in May and then we would take this back up in June? I was trying to understand kind of what y'all's direction was.
Sure. So what I can say is from the very exciting policy committee retreat, I had about a day or two to get this presentation done, which we did share at the principals meeting. So we have gone 2 layers down in terms of district staff and principals. We need to talk to our RPC coordinators, student support, so counselors, social workers, teachers. Like we need to keep going down to make sure that we have curated all of the feedback so that we're making the most informed recommendation to the Board of Education. We just haven't had that time in this swift turnaround in getting the revisions and then preparing for the presentation.
No, I appreciate that very much because what's been concerning me as we make this major shift is it's coming at the time that we're also making staffing cuts and allotment changes. And you heard loud and clear from folks that they need more support, not less. They need alternatives for those pre-K2 students and the whole laundry list that you delineated. So I guess, is our feedback tonight kind of general to you all, and then you bring it back in June with more? That's, like, it seems we're going to get ahead of what y'all might need if we take it back to policy committee next week. Unless I'm totally misunderstanding what you just presented.
Dr. Lewis or Dr. King?
Yeah, I would just say general feedback will be extremely helpful as we continue to go down this path. And I will say we are headed in the right direction. I know we brought some data, discipline data to you before, that we are down district-wide 17% of our out-of-school suspensions, with our largest decrease being with our students with disabilities around 29%. So we are headed in the right direction. I think so. General feedback this evening will be helpful as we continue to garner additional feedback from additional stakeholders.
That's super helpful. My general feedback and wondering is with the pre-K to 2, 5 things that we delineated. I heard from a principal or two that they wonder if a serious safety concern, specifically kind of an assault, something between 2 students where it helps them to have a day cooling off period, like whether that would be covered in this or not, whether they would still have that discretion, the way it's written. And that was a wondering I had that got shared with me. And then I thought I'd submitted this question, and apparently I didn't sit my questions in, I just wrote them down. But I think y'all shared some explicit data with the principals at the principal meeting. I would love to see that, because what I'd heard was that we have majority of our schools, elementary schools, doing very well.
That's
And a
correct.
handful that are not. And so kind of y'all's thinking on targeted interventions and supports you're giving to those 7 or 8 schools would be helpful as well.
Yeah, if we look specifically at our kindergarten suspension, less than half of our schools have even suspended, kindergarten students. And so those numbers are, with one student being suspended is one too many, right? We look at from a holistic standpoint of over 2,000 kindergarten students and 30 this year, I think that's the number so far.
So, was that a question? Or
The question was kind of the request for the data. The other question was about that safety, kind of serious safety issue with very young children, whether that discretion is still here for principals or not, in the way that this is drafted, and how, I wasn't sure when I read back through it whether that's an option or not, for kind of, because in light of essentially not having a new directions or a place or an internal restorative practice coordinator in every elementary school, which we wish we did and we don't, like, how is it written now specifically to address serious safety issues in y'all's reading?
So level 1 is addressed there, that is an opportunity for this level. Yeah. Level 2. And so any type of cooling out or head home does count as a suspension. And so it will still fall underneath this guidance. Principals would still have that flexibility with conferring with their principal supervisor in terms of safety, anything that is a level 2 offense. So it still does provide that flexibility there. And I also wanted to mention that we have not yet shared any of this. Want to get to our most final draft to get family feedback on this as well. And so we just haven't had that opportunity.
All right, Ms. Cardon and then Ms. Rogers.
Thanks so much for all of your work on this. This has been great and is moving in the right direction. I want to start by following up on that last question and response, because I was, in my read of the current policy, out-of-school suspension is still permitted for our youngest learners for level 1B infractions. And that would include non-compliance, disrespect, disruptive behavior. Am I reading that correctly? Because that is concerning to me that that's still, so I have the opposite concern, that it doesn't go far enough yet, especially considering that for our youngest learners, the majority of, if we just look at kindergartners, for example, the majority of the suspensions were in this last year were due to non-compliance and disrespect. And I'm wondering, or I have a first grader. I know they can be non-compliant and disrespectful. Trust me, I see it every day. But is that is sending them out of the school building the best we can do for those students?
So I will say that the team and I, as well as the CISS team, analyzed this data very thoroughly. And so what we see across our trend, looking at our data, is that although it is noted as disrespect, the actual reading of the incident suggests that there was an escalated in terms of it was not properly coded. So there was some disrespect to staff, but there were some other things that transpired in the incident that elevates it. So I think it is 2 or 3 that are actually not falling in the process that you're talking about, where three different students had the potential to be suspended. But we are holistically as a district not suspending for disrespect. We are simply not codifying it consistently in terms of the incidents. So I think that could be more that is done if that wants to come up to the Board of Education. But what I'm alluding to or explaining is that's not a pervasive issue in our district. What is pervasive is taking a look at incidents, making sure that they're coded properly, and making sure that we have some really reflective understandings of analyzing incidents for their most escalated behavior, and making sure that we have that direct communication and that it's labeled correctly in the educator's handbook. The other thing that I would say in terms of the data that we share with principals is identifiable data. And so we would not be able to share that to the board in that same way. But I will be happy to share that data with you so that you can see what I'm talking about. Majority of the things that we're seeing that raise a red flag in terms of I'm being suspended for disrespect or insubordination. When you read what actually happened with the student, which would not be public facing information, it was aggression, or it was a hit, it was something else to the situation. So it was improperly coded.
Thank you. I still think that in the policy, it's my preference, it might not be the will of the whole board, but the majority of the board, that we not allow suspensions for those types of behaviors, and we only allow them in other more extreme cases. You're reminding me of another concern that you did mention tonight. It's in the slides. I just didn't see it in the policy yet, which is specifically noting that there'll be an examination of mitigating factors for our students with IEPs or 504s, wherein we take into consideration their disability as a potential reason that they may have exhibited the behavior. And then we consider that and whether their needs were met or not when we decide what the consequence is for that behavior. I think that's the intent, and it might be what's being done or what y'all are moving towards, but I'd like it to be in policy. Yeah. And I think I'd like inclusion of pre-K. I hear there's some complications with that, but I think official inclusion of our pre-K through 3rd grade would be my preference. Again, don't know if it's the will of the whole board, but it's mine. And then I love the principal supervisor review, but I wonder is that possible for all elementary school suspensions? What would that look like if there were a principal supervisor review for all of our pre-K through 5 suspensions, for example, so another layer of review?
So I think looking at the number of suspensions we have right now, 112, 115, it's possible. And it is something that our assistant superintendents, my fellow assistant superintendents that supervise principals are ready to execute at the will of the board. It's just around what other operational structures are we going to put in place and how we streamline that at K5 with both assistant superintendents and how that would look. And then we just want to be clear again where that flexibility is with certain incidents in the policy, which is now codified, and where there's explicit written in the policy where it's explicitly you have to confer with your principal supervisor, as well as where we suggest you confer with your principal supervisor. So all that to say, yes, it's something that we can operationalize if that's the will of the board in support of this policy revisions.
Thank you. And along those lines, last thing, just to put this out there in case others are interested, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on another layer of review for those students with disabilities. So to make sure that someone with some expertise in that area can evaluate whether that's the best mechanism for that student, either putting them out of school or sending them to new directions. We're hearing some challenges with what happens with students that have various disabilities when they're placed in places like New Directions, or again, when they're punished with suspension, and whether that's appropriate for them or not.
All right. Vice Chair Rogers, and then Mr. Tapp.
Like many of my colleagues, I'm very impressed about where this is headed. Thank you. I appreciate you. I don't know what the consensus of the board is on this, but I finally realized for me where the disconnect is between the board and where y'all are. And so we're talking about restorative conversations and restorative circles as a response to what's happening in lieu of suspension. And what truly I think the board would like to see happening is the restorative conversations and circles and practices being taught and implemented by students, by educators and students before an event happens. So it's not an alternative to suspension. It is something that happens as a learning mechanism, teaching mechanism, so that students understand when things get tense, how we have conversations about it, and how we keep kicking from kicking, prevent kicking another student, or prevent throwing something at the teacher, right? So we make sure that those things are happening, those restorative conversations, those temperamental things, behavior things are happening before an incident occurs. I think the other piece to that is I hear administration saying, and like Ms. Bayer, I've heard from principals about how it's functioning well in many of our elementary schools. We do appreciate that work and know it's not easy in keeping our students in school. I think my question would be, in the schools where it's not working efficiently, how can the board be assured by the MTSS office and superintendent, et cetera, that systems are in place at those schools to teach restorative practices before incidents begin to occur, right? And even when there's a disconnect between educators and the principals, how are they using restorative practices to help build those relationships before the tension builds so high that it's reflected in the teacher working condition survey, right? And so how do we make this a pattern of use of restorative practices and not an item or a tool for disciplinary action?
So you're speaking my language, Vice Chair Rogers. I just want to say that, over the years, what we have really tried to build is a system of 80% of restorative practices is proactive. That's what our social emotional learning curriculum that you all provide for us through your funding and prioritizing that for us. That's what that is all about, is making sure that 80% of our work is every day. How do we show up? How do we treat one another? How do we build relationships? How do we build trust? And then if something does occur that we should expect among human interactions, we have the capital to respond to that in a way that is restorative and built around restoring those relationships and repairing them, as opposed to just being a punishment-focused response. And so now we've got that codified. So we agree with you. I think there's less of a disconnect. We just really wanted to stay focused on the revisions and how restorative practices impacted that, the policy.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I had one question, just left me come back.
Mr. Tapp.
I'd just add to that, one of the things that we do through our impact structure, impact meeting structure, which is really important as it relates to this, is part of the conversations that we have with administrators would be around how they are using those SEL curriculums, right? And specifically, opportunities to match what they report to us about their use of SEL structures and the discipline data that we see relative to those schools. So for instance, very often you might see us working in a school and they speak to us about, a challenge around certain behaviors. And that provides us with an opportunity to ask them and work with them around, how they are leveraging and frankly personalizing those SEL curriculums to speak specifically to those challenges. And so to your question about how we kind of assure the board that work is going on, that happens through our impact structure, our impact meeting structure. And, that would be our response to that.
My question that I remembered is that report out. You were talking about the reporting is identifiable that goes to the principals, and that it would have to be presented to the board differently. Obviously, we don't want identifiable information. That's not what we're asking for. I think, can you help us and the public understand if it's going through the process, the teacher enters the write-up in educator's handbook, it goes to the principal. The principal's already identified that, already knows the students that are being suspended and are already interacting with the educators in the school building. So can you talk to us about the process of why you're reporting that data back to the principals, but not to the board? Like, does that make sense?
No, you say it one more time.
All right, so I'm principal of XYZ school, and educators put in their write-up and educator handbook. It goes to the principal's desk, the principal administers the suspension or the disciplinary action, whatever it is for the student. When you say you're reporting the data back to the principal, what is the purpose? What is the conversation of the report back to the principal if the principal is the one that took the action?
Gotcha. So disciplinary responses are shared responsibility amongst all administrators. The meeting that we were in with just principals. APs are in a lot of cases the primary person that issues that response to a particular incident. And so the whole point of sharing that data was a reflection for principals, since that is often delegated, especially in larger schools, to look across the decision making that's happened in the administrative team and see where they see congruence, see where they see variance. So it really was a reflective activity to say, let's look at this situation without how it was coded. Let's read this situation very deeply and think about what would we code it as? Okay, what would we code it as? Now let's look at how it was coded. Oh, there was some nuance there. So it's really just reflective, and those conversations happen in cycles. We typically have a cadence where we meet with principals, then APs, then coaches and district staff. And so this data was shared for that point because the principal is not the sole person that issues a response to an incident. And so wanting them to reflect on the work that needs to happen at the instructional leadership team level on how we get a better alignment with our responses to incidents.
Thank you. I think there's a disconnect in community about the way this process works
Gotcha.
and the impact that the board has on those conversations. But the fact that you all are having those conversations is important to demonstrate, and I appreciate that.
Mr. Tapp?
Thank you very much. Thank you all for this information. It's very important, and you all are definitely moving in the right direction. My question is around unhoused students. Do we keep data on students who may be unhoused like we do with EC students? But what is that like? And I want to see whether or not with students being unhoused, if they're being suspended, are we doing interventions of their situation?
So I will say that our educator's handbook, which is our non-official data curation system that is then translated over to Infinite Campus, our state level school information system does not consider that type of designation for a student. We can make note of that in terms of our monthly and quarterly disaggregate conversations to make sure we tease that out. But currently both systems do not delineate for unhoused students and families.
Yeah. Well, I would then suggest that whatever we can do to locally be able to track that be very important. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Ms. Haragoff?
I just again wanted to appreciate all the work that has been done on this. This is a huge step for this policy moving. For me, it translates as a articulating better the culture we're trying to create with restorative practices in all of our buildings, and also I hope it says, you know, it states that like for our school system, that we have a universal principle of suspensions not being a healthy option. Suspensions can actually cause our students more harm for various reasons, socially, emotionally. It's feeding, our lack of our absenteeism, chronic absenteeism, all of these different things. So I love the direction that the policy is moving in, and just wanted to, to be reminded that I hope in another iteration, as we continue to shift the culture, that we have more conversations about the difference between restorative practice and restorative justice. And that we continue to understand how we can be a school system that doesn't have suspensions for K-5 at all, or have any need for that, because we have the resources in place to get there, to do that. I don't want suspensions to be an option for classroom management. I would like if in, there's that word again, exigent, the one I can't say, circumstances, that those be authentic, truly, unequivocally, serious, dangerous, situations that we aren't able to mitigate in some, life-threatening, where, it's hard to imagine what that developmentally, what that looks like for elementary school. So, yep, I just want to keep that lens there. I also heard Ms. Carter-Otten mention, thinking about, instead of just K2, extending it to K3, data's closer to, because I really would love to see K5, no suspensions. I really would love to see it not even considered in elementary school. Of course, with good options for, with training, all the things around restorative practice and restorative justice. I think that's one of the things that Ms. Rogers brought up about, it's restorative practice is not the thing that is disciplinary. And there's, cultural aspects of restorative practice that we haven't gotten to yet as a district, that we're still trying to implement. Restorative justice is a conversation that we don't often talk about, but I think we're kind of referring to, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about what that is. And that is more, could be more in a disciplinary discussion about, once something has occurred and it wasn't handled properly, or it's caused harm, then how do you rectify that? So, restorative practices are not the end-all be-all solution to every single thing, but it is something that I'm very proud of in our district, and I'm so glad that we're moving to really just make sure that that culture is pervasive throughout. And that's just a comment, no questions.
Any other questions, Ms. Byer?
Yeah, I hear us questioning third grade, and no one wants anyone suspended out of school in elementary school at all. I do want to share that and share for the community that wasn't able to be at the committee meeting, that the committee kind of landed on pre-K 2, because for third through fifth grade, we do have new directions and services and supports for students there. And knowing what a massive shift this alone is going to be for staff this late in the year, running into summer, as we're making massive cuts with an underfunded county budget, a state budget that isn't a real solution, is just the back of an envelope right now, and so much uncertainty with future staffing and allotments. I think it felt like the most we could do, when, to me at least. And so that's where at least the pre-K two as a starting place came from. I'm not sure if we got pre-K in the policy language, and I'm sitting here trying to find where it would be. I don't know if we got that notion of preschool. It's
It-
not, it's not.
It is not in there due to the
The federal
yeah,
stuff
so
that
we
you
just want to
spoke
make
about.
sure we're not, you know. We're going to
Yep.
work with Jason on that.
That would be great. That would be great. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from my colleagues? I really appreciate this presentation and all the direction that we're going in. I remember bringing restorative practices and us talking about, let's transition to this as a district. And so I'm glad to be where we are and recognize it will continue to be an evolving practice as we continue to have people come and they need to be up to speed, right? And that will continue to be an evolving practice. I think one of the questions that I'm wrestling with, and I hope that we can think about this differently, is like, what will it take to keep this child in school? So when said child is in the office and we're talking about suspension, what would it actually take to keep little Johnny, little Sarah, whoever it is, in school? And then how are we building the resources to do that? Because at this point, with the numbers trending and to where they are, we know these individual students. We know their needs, what they might need to be connected to, what resources in the community they might need. And so how are we building our arsenal around not how do we, not suspend, but what does it take to keep them engaged in learning? What does it take to keep them engaged in the classroom? So I just really hope that we can keep pondering that question as we're navigating alternatives to suspension or not suspending at all, keeping kids learning. This is for first read, Ms. Byer.
Yeah, that was a great point, Chair Umstead. That one of the conversations I had with school staff was that sometimes there's a delay in students getting the evaluation they need for potential 504 services, like that window of time for a school once they start to see needs that students have, but until the team can get in there and do their assessment is almost sometimes a 6 to 8 week window, sometimes that kind of thing. If there are ways that we can actually kind of have a stat response triage better. I don't know, with district support and resources was something that came up in conversation. I don't know if y'all had heard that as well, but it's a very, very complex issue, and I'm glad you're going to continue to listen and support our staff through this transition. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I'll just say
Dr.
to your point, Board Member Byer, any student that's suspected of having a disability, whether they qualify or not yet, still treated as if they do have a disability in terms of that 10-day max for out-of-school suspension. So they still have those procedural safeguards. I just wanted to point that out.
It makes me wonder if we started a 5-day something too, right? As we're looking at decreasing suspensions. Because by the time you get to 10, that's a significant chunk of time for a kindergartner, elementary school student to be that's chronic absenteeism. And this probably is already a part of the MTSS process, but once you get to 2, 3, 5, what are we already doing to do some of that assessment and a reevaluation? This is for first reading, board members, so motion, if we feel ready.
So I was going to move that we take 4301 to our June work session because it sounded like y'all needed more time to get staff feedback.
Second.
Been moved that we move policy 4301 to the June work session. And will that be for a first read, Ms. Byer, another first read, or would you?
Wait, I know it's time sensitive for you all. Is June work session the latest we should go, I'm assuming? Yeah, it'll be for second read.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So the motion is to approve it for first reading, move it to
Yeah.
second read at the
On
June work session.
discussion rather than consent, since you might make changes that we've talked about tonight.
That sounds good. And it's been seconded by Ms. Rogers. Is there any other discussion?
Yep.
Ms. Rogers.
So will we waive our work session policy to approve the policy at work session?
We can.
So I'd like that noted in the motion, if that's okay.
I think I would,
Or just wait till then,
yes, because we don't know what's going
if
to
it's gonna be
happen.
ready. Okay.
I can't predict. We definitely hope that the policy will be passed, so we can't predict that at this point. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, use the same sign. It passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you all. That brings us to the next items on our agenda, which are for information only. And that brings us next to the summary of follow-up items. Pass it over to Dr. Lewis or staff.
I'll be happy to chime in. As far as follow-up, we took some notes gathering the feedback from the board on what to do back in policy. So specifically to policy 4326, policy committee will be looking at the data reporting to the board, some of the data collection, and the timeline for notifying parents. Those were the major pieces. 4301.1 and .2, the staff will continue gathering input. And those were the major pieces of follow-up around policies.
Right. Any other, Ms. Byer, comments on that?
Did we have consensus, or were you all able to share the discipline data that you shared with principals? I think I asked it and didn't actually ask people whether they were interested in seeing it.
That's a question for the board. Is there consensus on that data?
I think so, because I think I must have left it sit there.
Board members, would we like to see?
Would it be de-identified or presented in a form that was manageable or allowable?
Yeah, so there is consensus, it looks like, from board members that we would like to see that data. We'll add that to the summary of follow-up items.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, the next item is a closed session. I'll take a motion to go into close.
Move that we go into closed session for the reasons stated on the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Byer, seconded by Ms. Carter Otten, that we go into closed session for the reasons stated on the agenda. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, use the same sign. It passes 6-0. We're now moved into closed session. For all of those who are streaming with us, we will not return to streaming after close. Have a good evening.